Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. That's right. We might be locked in, but it's still time to talk about Age of Sigmar and all things Warhammer. Look, you can't keep us down. That's right. You can't stop it. This is the time for this kind of streaming. And joining me, as always, also bunkered in his own house with a lot more people, it's my co-host, Tom.
Hello, friends. Yeah, if I was in Austria, I'd have to kick one of our family members out in order to properly be quarantined.
Well, look, one of those kids, you give them one of those little sticks with a like a little tied up,
Yep,
red and white napkin on it, put their possessions in it. You say, "Go find a train. It's time to live on the road." Okay? That's what you got to do.
it's been a good 9 years, Wes.
Right. Get
Good
out of
luck.
here. Yeah, you're out on your own. That's right. That thing, bindle? Is that what it's called? Is it called a bindle? I don't know.
I don't know.
Something like that. Also joining us this week, he's back. It's the marathon man, the man who has traditionally been our guest for long shows. I don't think we'll go that late tonight. But at any rate, it's Mr. Tyler Emerson, Scrubby and Wells. How you doing, buddy?
Good. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, man. Good to have you back on the show. So we're gonna do some fun stuff tonight. We're gonna talk about some statistics, but specifically a different kind of stats. We're going to talk about stats from the perspective of Age of Sigmar aesthetics, based on the survey that I did and started last week. And since I was forced at the apparent barrel of a gun to buy that survey tool for the next year, I'll probably do some more of these. So, because I'm not going to let this investment go to waste. So at any
Wow.
rate, yeah,
Wow.
don't ask about it. Anyways, just know that this was not a pleasant thing, but that's such
Oh,
is life. At any rate, it's fine, whatever. Um,
oof.
yeah, but of course first, and I'm just let me say this, I'm super excited about this. Some really cool results from this survey. Some of which I am personally thrilled about, some of which surprised me. And you'll see as we get into it. I've got a presentation prepared. That's right. We're going to do presentation time tonight.
Tuck in, folks.
That's right. So, at any rate, let's start with some news. What do we got?
Rumor engine?
It's up on the screen. Could
Okay.
be a 40K thing. Could be an AOS thing. This is an interesting thing. Weird bloodletter-ish skull.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler, thoughts on the rumor engine from this week? Our bloodletter-like skull.
Yeah, maybe. What's the name of that warband we haven't seen yet? Although that seems unlikely that they would necessarily do a rumor engine for the Scions warband.
The Scions of Flame or whatever.
Signs of Flame, yeah.
Oh, that could be.
That
Yeah, I can see that.
came to mind initially, but may not be likely that they would do a rumor engine when you would think that that's going to be out pretty soon.
Well, we've seen the rumor engine they did 2 weeks ago was spoiled the next week.
Oh,
Because
okay.
it was they took
True.
the rumor engine was the little blades of grass or whatever on Ragnar or something like that. Like, I mean, it was that
Yeah,
fast.
yeah.
Or I'm sorry, not on Ragnar, on the new updated Rambo Cadian shock trooper lieutenant lady.
Oh, right. Yep.
There you go. That's what it was. It was like a jungle plant. And so
Yep.
then she got spoiled the next week.
Mm.
The Silence of Flame's a
next
good
week.
call. I like that one.
Yeah,
Because it does look
I
like a
get it.
chaos staff from a sorcerer in that warband, which assumingly they would have some kind of person like that. Or not warband, sorry, Warcry warband, whatever we're calling those things. They might have that kind of person in there. Sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, I could see that. I dig that. That's a good call. Tom, any different thoughts? Other thoughts?
Um, something 40K.
Something 40K, huh? Yeah, I mean, it's
I'm sure there's a legion. There's a legion that goes with a damned legion or something.
sure. It's like it is obviously very chaos-y, but
Right.
I would love it if it was some kind of new second wave for anything chaosy, and this was like some kind of chaos sorcerer dude. That would be super awesome. But I think your Scions is probably the right call.
Mm.
So I like that. All right. Cool. Great. What else we got, Tom? What's our next big news item? I know what it is.
The world ended.
That's not what happened.
Adepticon was canceled.
Yes.
And everything else is canceled. Just everything for the next 2 to 3 months is gone forever.
Correct. So the next Warhammer Fest was canceled. Adepticon was canceled. Basically, all the tournaments in the next 2 to 3 months are canceled. So congratulations to Doom and Darkness for running one of the last tournaments in the world. That's pretty awesome. Way to go. For the next couple of months at least. Obviously, we'll see how all this looks when it comes to the summertime. But yeah, I mean, it's a shame. I'm sad about it. I spent about 10 months prepping my Golden Demon projects for this year, and now they won't have a home. I guess I can take them next year, obviously, but then that means that the competition will be even more fierce. Like the U.S. Golden Demon was already set up to be an insane contest of insanity. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now you're going to have another year of pent up hobby coming at it. Oh, I hope they're ready because it's going to be Looney Tunes next year. Looney Tunes.
And it was supposed to be a huge announcement this year.
I know.
With Adepticon. And there was going to be that sweet free model.
Sure.
And
you're going to get a free Lumineth guy, most likely.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I understand. It's deflating. We're all dealing with it. Tyler, what are your thoughts?
Didn't they talk about? Yeah, absolutely. Didn't they talk about it was going to be a 4-hour preview this year?
Yeah, something
insane. So maybe it'll be 2 hours each. I thought I saw that they're going to split it into 2 shows.
Correct, which is the follow-up news item, which is that, but don't worry, we'll still get a reveal show, and that is, the first reveal show will be on the 28th, and the second reveal show will be on the 4th, so we're going to split it into 2 reveal shows, and Tom and I will do live streams afterward as apropos. I think, Tom, you might be up here visiting during that time.
I will physically be at your house, yes.
Yep. We're being responsible.
Here's the deal. They can take Adepticon away from me, but they can't take Vince.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm forcing him to host me.
That's right.
I'm coming over and we're going to play some games.
Yeah, and there's nothing let's not take all of this to an insane level, right? You want to get together with a friend or two and have a meal or have some time and have a game of Warhammer for the love of God. That's fine. Social distancing doesn't mean literally you're not allowed to leave your house. It just means be responsible, right? So yes, of course, perfectly fine. And so I'm looking forward to that. We'll see who else we can get around to play some games.
Totally.
A couple of us just hanging out playing some Warhammer sounds a great time.
Yeah, it's tempting. It's very tempting. I appreciate the invite.
Exactly. We were trying to get Tyler up here, but it was too far. It's a
little too far to travel at this time.
I understand.
I mean, it's just an epidemic.
Yeah.
It's fine. What else? Other news. So Lumineth are coming momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
We had the Hammerhall Herald drop, which means that they're about 2 weeks away. If history bears itself out, that is.
Have you looked at that? I was wondering if anybody had nerded out on that, looking at the time frame.
It's generally about 2 weeks.
Okay, because I know intuitively it felt like that's been the case. Whenever you would see that, you would shortly see the pre-order.
Yeah, I went back and looked a little bit. I'll admit I didn't put the dates into Excel or something like I did for all the rest of these stats. But yes, right. In general, I mean, give or take, because the Herald usually comes out in the middle of the week, right? So there's extra days there. But usually you're looking about 2 weeks, which would line up with what you would expect at Adepticon. One would expect that they'd have some stuff there and they'd go, okay, next week it's all on pre-order, there you go, or something like that.
Yeah.
Would be the chain of events one would expect, which matches exactly to the 2 week expectation, right?
Yeah.
So,
is Martin Orlando still digging his heels in that Tyrion is not coming for this first wave?
He's really excited.
He's in the chat, so I'm sure he'll tell us.
All right, Martin, you're wrong, buddy. You were wrong. You were wrong when you started it, and you're still wrong. He's coming.
I personally hope he's not, for reasons I've previously said many
Right.
times.
Well, if he's not, that means we might get more elves later. Like,
Yeah.
that's the key here. If he is coming, it could be a while.
Like,
Yeah.
because angel elves are way up here for me. Like, that concept, that's like a hot 10, okay? Way near the top,
Mm,
okay?
yeah.
Existing elves that have been revealed, way down here. That's a 1. That's a solid 1. Maybe
man.
a 2 or a 3. Just the light of Eltharion is carrying all positive score for this army so far on his ethereal
On his-
shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, for
incorporeal
me,
shoulders.
I just don't know, like, what I'm going to do. Like, this is a more existential problem. Because since we've had rumor engines,
Mhm.
the answer has always been elves.
Sure.
And now we actually are going to have them in hand, and maybe it won't be elves.
What's funny is that a lot of the times that on this show, Tom, you've said elves. It turned out to be elves.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
a lot of those
it's not the
are
ones I
Lumineth.
thought. But yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's like the old trick of how do you program an
Yeah.
AI to pick scripts? You tell like what's going to be what script is going to make money or whatever. You just
Yeah.
make it programmed to always say no, and it'll have a 95% confidence interval.
Yeah. That's
Right.
fair. As I
So
was saying that, like, yeah.
if Tom's hit rate is high only because or the number of guesses that he's had versus the
Because
number of
I take a
elf-related
whole
spoilers we've had.
wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, just shots on goal is a thing here.
All right, we got to balance out some of the disdain that's been coming from you, Vince, on this show
Mhm.
over the past few weeks, especially
Sure.
with
Yeah,
this
you're just
Lumineth
such a
release.
negative. You're
And
just so negative. Vince.
You've always been that way on this show.
Mhm. Mhm.
Really bringing it down.
It's super
And
disappointing.
It's very disappointing. Yeah. So, Lumineth are fantastic.
They're
We've
not.
got a couple of issues. Techless, obviously, and Hatman, the mage that we've seen recently. Yeah, they leaned in a little bit too far into that hat, but love it. Other than that,
It doesn't
Okay,
matter.
Tom.
Just show me the Giants. Does which one of the preview shows are the Giants? Part 2? Is that the one I gotta wait on? Cool. That's the one I'm excited for.
right?
I don't know. I'm trying not. I'm trying to stay on target.
Sure. So what I'll say
Well-
is that I am interested to see what the rest of the Lumineth look like because clearly there's still more units to be revealed.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it's going to be more the Tyrionic side. Like they've been doing this. What Teklian is the sort of magic prowess, moon symbology, etc. Tyrionic is the sun, the martial prowess. Presumably, Light of Eltharion maybe reflects the more of the aesthetic or that Tyrionic side. So maybe we'll get more, and that kind of has that Diablo-esque sort of Diablo angels. What are they called?
Yeah,
In
sure.
Diablo,
I don't know.
Seraphim or whatever.
I know what you're talking about. The guy who showed up in Diablo 2 and is I think a bad guy
Yeah,
in Diablo
Tyrael.
3.
Yeah, Tyrael.
Tyrael, yeah.
Sounds right.
But yeah, I've heard some rumors that they might be having more of that kind of aesthetic on the Tyrionic side. So we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, I will say in the Hammerhall Herald spoiler that they gave, it did say from the Teklian cities or Tekliak or however they said it, right?
Yeah.
So like they specifically attributed it to that list. We lost your camera, by the way, there, Tom.
I'm working on that.
I figured as much. Okay, work away. While we're doing that, while Tom is working, we're gonna focus on Tyler here. There you go. Okay, so yeah, while Tom's working on that, so we got that announcement of those things, which is cool. I'm excited to see what the rest of that range looks like. I'm excited to see everything that comes after it. This was such a big show. I'd love some information on like when does that Adeptus Mechanicus stuff come out, because you've been spoiling it for like 3 months. When do I get the rest of my city's force?
Yeah.
So I'm pretty excited for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like there's just it's a shame that all this has gone down in this year, but I really hope that it doesn't impact what they had planned, because I know this is going to be such a big year for AOS right now that we're through all the books and everything. So yeah.
Be interesting to see how resilient their company in particular is to all of this. But that's a whole other topic. We Do you guys like this somewhat slow burn approach that they've been doing it with other factions previously, but certainly with Lumineth, this slow burn release?
Yeah, I think so. If you've got a whole new thing, right?
Mm.
If, in other words, if we're dealing with a situation where it is a whole army, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then yeah, I would very much love to see this kind of treatment get rolled out for other armies. I think it's pretty awesome. I don't know. For people who are big fans of the elves, I'd be curious to know what they think because they're the ones who it's really for. Hey, Tom's back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm back.
But I mean,
I
yeah,
was
for
just-
me, it seems cool.
Yeah. I was just thinking historically, it feels like such a contrast in the world we're in now relative to how they used to do marketing. A number of years ago, we were in a world where they were very secretive. You wouldn't
Right.
you'd find out extremely little in advance, and now it's quite different. Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of curious how folks responding to that. I generally like it. I think when this all started with Lumineth, they basically have done 4 articles, and it was every other week.
Mm-hmm.
Have they done 4 articles now?
They've done 3.
Something like
There's
that.
another one coming
3.
apparently
Okay,
next week or something, as normal.
gotcha. So it'd be about a 8-week timeline here.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say: they've tricked everybody into reading the lore
Right.
because
Yeah.
Right.
because they put out the deep dive lore on all these units and like slip in all the lore of the army and stuff, and people
Yeah.
are so hungry to know what's in the army and understand it and start guessing. People now have read those lore articles, so
Right.
it worked. You did it. You
Yeah,
tricked them.
yeah.
Congratulations.
So I love it. It's a great trick. Force everybody to read lore.
Yeah.
It's a way to get those sections of the book actually engaged.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. Yeah. So kind of it looks like most people are pretty positive about the long release, or those who aren't. Like Turrican said, really don't like the slow burn, but the range looks so bad. I don't have any interest in it anyways. So that's fair enough.
I mean, it's just, yeah.
It's definitely more Marmite than I was expecting so far. I mean, we'll see once we see the full range, but yeah.
For me, I think it highlighted, like as I've reflected on it, because like I've had some time to reflect on it. As I've reflected on it, it's highlighted to me how important the old aesthetic was. And not as a development, but how much I loved what the thing actually was itself. And like how, like, again, it was what pulled me. It's, like there's a nostalgia aspect because it was from like Warhammer Age of Reckoning, like playing High Elves. And so like that, the aesthetic itself was important. And so to have that aesthetic changed and developed, it no longer like triggers that nostalgia. And so now I'm just like, oh, well, these guys just look dumb, because it's not invoking
Yeah,
those memories.
it's funny, Tom, because I don't remember you playing High Elves in Age of Reckoning. I remember you spam cheating with
Chosen?
With your Chosen, yes. As the two of us were playing Choppas and would use our ability to let you spam your wave attack or whatever, and you'd hit it so fast that it would lag the server out, and then everybody would catch up and insta-die.
I mean, I warned them that it was broken, and they didn't fix it, so I used it.
Sure.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah, I just, so there's that aesthetic thing. So I'm coming to terms with how much I love elves, but I may not love these elves. And that's fine. But it just means that I may, like, if I'm going to do an army, like, it's going to have to be a different army project.
Well, one thing that's coming to mind in response to that is one potential outcome of the slow burn is that you get it in piecemeal as opposed to being able to sit down with your book or at worst listen to Man Reed's book or find someone that goes through the lore and generally take it all in at once in one sitting and then sit with that. But instead, you could be potentially forming the wrong conclusions too early before you actually have a fully developed picture of what you're ultimately going to be looking at.
True.
And
Sure.
so that could be one of the challenges with this, because I tend to have quite a bit of confidence that I'm going to love the full picture once we see it, that there's going to be a lot of care and thought put into these different elements. And certainly based on some of what I've been saying, and some people are critiquing it, it's too Eldari, too Craft Worlds, or it's too this, or it's too that. And I get some of that, but I don't know. I think we just got to wait and see until we get that full picture and really digest it.
Yep.
But I feel pretty confident that they're gonna do a good job with all of the bringing all of these elements together, play style, number of models, variety, the lore, even if there are some misses for some folks on some of the aesthetics.
I think it'll be a popular army just because of what it hits. But
Yeah.
as we'll dig into it, I would be. We'll see. Maybe we'll do another survey like we did here for this stuff in the future, and we'll see how the Lumineth compare against everything. But I'd want to
Yeah.
let some time pass because you're not going to get a clean sample if you do it, the week after they release or something, right?
Right.
But we'll see. We'll see, especially once we have the whole range. It's been in for a couple months, and how it goes. All right. So that's all our news. Quiet news week, not too surprising, other than the biggest news that's affected all of our lives in ways that we didn't expect. But, other than that, whatever. So let's talk about some pick of the week, man. Tyler, what do you got for us this week?
Excuse me. Yeah. Wargamer Online, they have come back with updated, simple but fantastic battle report format. And probably a lot of folks have seen them. They've done all kinds of things. They've got a number of guys and gals that have been involved in their team. So yeah, they have a new bat rep format that came out with, starting with a game with the new Seraphon Battle Tome last week. And then they just launched another one with Gits versus Fire Slayers. So check them out. I think it's a really nice format.
Nice.
I need to clarify something for our audience. They're afraid that I have corona because of the sneeze/cough. Let me clarify with everyone. I have terrible allergies. I'm congested and I'm sneezing. It does involve a cough that is slightly dry, but worry not. I have no fever, no aches. There's no threat of me being taken by the dreaded coronavirus.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Okay, so at any rate, yes, believe me, I understand, because in here where I am, it's been all over the shop on temperature. It's been up and down 20, 30 degrees every day. Like we had a good inch or two of snow on the ground on Saturday. It was nuts. And then the next day it was like in the mid 50s. So
sounds like Ohio.
So if you have like a lot of allergies or sinus stuff like I do, boy oh boy, was that a fun time for me.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But at any rate, okay. Let's talk about that. Okay, so pick of the week, continuing. Yes, great pick, Tyler. It will be down below.
Yeah.
Tom,
cool.
What do you got?
So, we talked about how we're going to be doing a response to the reveal show here a little over a week and a half. And actually, that's going to be part of a larger set of programming that's coming. There is a number of content producers are all gathering together in order to do, let me say it this way, in order to help fill the airwaves after the cancellation of Adepticon. It'll be under the hashtag Adepticon at Home. And a schedule is forthcoming, but basically we are going to try to fill the airwaves with live content for most of Adepticon through a bunch of different content producers in a bunch of different countries.
Yes, and I will say this is all being spearheaded by the coach,
Yep.
by AOS Coach, who's doing a great
Thanks, Coach.
job. So Adepticon at Home, you can see it there. He just posted it in there. If you follow Coach on Twitter and in all his various socials and subscribe to his channel and stuff, I'll put the coach's information down below. I mean, you should already be doing that. I'm going to use more of his information later on. So do please go out and do that. That will clue you in. I mean, it's probably channels hopefully you're already sub to, but between our channel and a lot of other content producers and people who are doing stuff for that weekend especially, so that way there's there's hopefully a lot of stuff to entertain people over what was supposed to be a great convention weekend. We'll still cover it as best we can with a lot of fun content. So there you go.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna do a show with Mephisto. We've got to figure out what the hell we're talking about, but
that's fine.
it
If we're
doesn't
talking
matter.
to Meph, he's gonna find a way. The man, he's
Yeah.
a great. He goes.
Yep.
You run out the line.
Yeah. Yeah, looking forward to it. It'll be a lot of fun.
Okay. So let's my pick of the week. Sorry. My pick is Travarian was nice enough to have me on his channel. A lot of people had talked about I do the interview with the artist series, and some people had asked about me being interviewed. Well, Travarian reached out to me. He does his own series of interviews, and he was interested. He wanted to know if I would come on. I said, sure, I'd love to. So we had just a nice chat. It's his own format. He's in no way doing what I'm doing. It's very different, but it was a lot of fun to talk to him. Travarian's obviously an incredibly talented artist, and it was great to just sit down and talk hobby with him. So I'll link it down below. But you can go find that. So it was a lot of fun to do.
Nice.
And you should also be subbed up to Travarian in general. If you're not if you're looking for some great painting advice, he is really a person that I watch every one he does. He's great. The man has a full clip of golden demons under his belt, and he paints display models more or less professionally, and he's a sculptor who does amazing sculpting work. So it's great. There you go. All right.
Where's he based?
Germany.
Cool.
That
just
sounds
curious.
right. Yes.
Okay.
In Germany. I think that's right. Because some people are in Germany and some people are in Austria, and I know that that's probably very insulting to the two of them, but I sometimes get who's in which thing confused.
Yeah.
You're the worst.
Clearly. Apologies to all of our German and Austrian followers and listeners. Okay. So let's talk about some hobby time, guys. Tyler.
I've got a bunch. I've got a whole bunch here.
Uh-oh.
I've been working on my Stormcast army, been painting it up. Yeah. Knocked out about 10 Retributors the other day.
So Tyler famously
hard work.
You don't paint,
Ever.
It's a long at this point the streak has to be maintained. It's gone on for too long to change.
It's egregious. That's all I'm going to say.
Here's what I'll say.
Historic.
Is there a better time, Tyler, for you to start painting than now?
That's always everybody's line. It's like, contrast paints, that was the line. Like contrast paints, like what's your excuse now?
You're in a pandemic.
Streak has to be maintained, boys. I've got principles. I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know how to respond, Tyler. Like, you're literally playing one of the easiest to paint armies in the game.
If everybody wants to know how good this community is, the fact that someone like me, I still refuse to paint, and that I haven't been ostracized from this community, not entirely. Everybody, for the most part, is very nice.
We've only partially ostracized you.
We're slacking.
That's true. That speaks volumes of the quality of this community.
Like, imagine if somebody just decided to not do sportsmanship. They're like, nah, that's not for me.
Absolutely. Right.
They just showed up to the table and punched their opponent in the face.
They're like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Just spit on them directly.
That's that's the scale of what we're talking about.
That's what I think about you and this crap army you've got on the table in front of me. What is this garbage? You're going to bring this against me? I don't even know why you'd put this on the table. This is so stupid and terrible. You're stupid and terrible for bringing it. Go ahead. Write down the 1. I want the 1. Give me a 0.
Yeah. I got to say, I do co-sign the idea of Doug Riggs volunteering to show up and punch some people. I'm all in on volunteering for that, to be punched by Doug.
There you go. That's he's got the punches. Okay. Are you have you been making some lists, thinking about it, that kind of stuff? Like what are you working on right now, hobby wise? Not painting, but there's
I do want to give a shout out to the fantastic metagames Unlimited, which are going to be like probably all FLGSs across the country. Some tough times right now. They've gone ahead and closed their game room, and a lot of stores, they get by on very small margins.
Yep.
So hopefully it's not going to be a catastrophe for a lot of them with what's going on. But we've been blessed to have this extraordinary, really large store for so long, for most of my life, like 2+ decades, and it's gone from strength to strength. And it's been a going on 5-year process to grow the Age of Sigmar community from myself and about one other person, Cody Bailey especially, to we finally had like a couple weekends before all of this happened, a one-dayer where there were about 26 people that played at 26 people in Springfield, Missouri. And it was, there were so many people who were part of getting the community to that point. Ryan Sala, Cody Bailey. I mean, I could list off a long list of names, Cole Morgan. So I just wanted to thank those guys for all of their hard work and helping make that happen. And hopefully they'll be able to get through this and we can keep growing it from that point. Yeah, we had people from St. Louis, and the store is interested in doing a 2-day event, which we were starting to plan for because Missouri is such a great spot with getting all the different hubs, Texas, Oklahoma, et cetera, to come out for a 2-dayer. So yeah, just can't thank those guys enough for everything that they've done.
That's awesome. And to be clear, everyone, Tyler doesn't play with gray models. He has a beauty. Like he gets his army commission painted. So he always shows up with painted models. He only plays with painted stuff. And you're not the first person I've actually met in this hobby who does that. It's just not the thing. It's not your bag. Yeah. I will lambast you forever for it, but I know multiple people who that's their strat.
Who here doesn't play with professional models, professionally painted models all the time? I mean, no.
Well,
I guess I'm.
And by the way, Tyler also, in addition to having his stuff commission painted, always tells the TOs that and extracts himself from like any painting related sort of awards or anything like that. So like Tyler's a stand-up guy in this regard by all measures. So just
well, I don't know about that, but yeah, that's important. That's important to do. 32 models, guys. That's all you need. 32 model Stormcast Eternals.
Correct number of models. 25 to 40 is the appropriate number of models for an army. That's right.
Optimal AOS.
That's right.
I put together like a 13.
Tom, you wouldn't run an army with less than 90. Get out of here.
No, here's the deal. I put together like a 15 model list, Flesh Eater port list, and like almost ran it. Like I thought about as my next army.
15 model, including the summoning?
No.
There we go. Yep. In comes the 60 ghouls, and that's out the window, my friend.
Yeah. I mean, they can only summon another like 30 models, not 60. Come on now.
Sure. At any rate,
Staunchcast boys. It's been holding us. I've played a ton of Staunchcast over the last 3 months now.
Yep.
And we don't have all the filth. Like we don't have OBR. We've got a Fire Slayers player, but he's got some semblance of morals, so it's not 60.
He's not running
3x20 Hearthguard. Yeah. He's playing both. He's playing Vostar, which I don't get why everybody is still playing Himdar. Vostar, man, the speed. It opens up so many possibilities. I love it. Like I get sometimes you're going to want to activate first, but
no, sorry. No, like I'm still on Hermdar. Between that and the -1 to wound permanently in a 12-inch bubble. Like,
well, yeah, but you get that in Vostar.
You don't. That's
really?
The command trait of Hermdar.
Oh, okay. I thought you still get it. Okay. Anyway, it was very impressive, the speed of Vostar.
No, it is. It's very fast. I would love to run a Volkite heavy, Magmadroth heavy Vostarg.
Yeah.
Like if I did Vostarg, I would so when the inevitable Hearthguard nerf comes, like I could see myself jumping to Vostarg and running Volkite heavy blocks.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. I agree with Anthony with Crazy Horse in the chat, by the way, Tyler, who said now you've got to add Lord Croak as an ally. So
yeah, I was looking at that. It's interesting. Yeah, one of the items on the long list of SCE challenges right now is CP generation. So yeah, you kind of have to play in realms to I think really get full value out of Croak with all those spells. Obviously, you're not getting a spell lore from Seraphon if it's an ally, but yeah, no, that's not a bad shout.
He can still do his own spell lots of times, so that's fine.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
he can just spam his
I guess
spell.
You could. How much is he right now? 340, 320.
I think he's pretty cheap. He's 320. Too cheap is the
320?
answer. We'll talk about it on the
Oh.
Seraphon show next week. I haven't internalized all of the Seraphon stuff yet because I've been working with these stats. So
Right. Well, I was just thinking about the beacon, like the King Star Priest or whatever. If you'd have the points that you could ally in there, I'm sure this King Star Priest is not 80 points.
No, I think
So-
he's I'd have to go look. He's pretty cheap.
Yeah.
They're all the little skinky heroes. Yeah, Dan said he's 320. All the little skinky heroes are pretty cheap, but I don't remember which ones. One of them is 80 points, but I don't remember which one's 80 points. At any rate, and yes, multiple people confirm 320. He's too cheap.
Yeah.
But he's real good. That's for sure. He's a solid dude. Also, by the way, I just want to shout out Charles in the comment who said, commission painting is fair enough. Tom commissioned sports votes last year by having Rob as his teammate at Adepticon. So
I mean,
Very fair.
you're not wrong. Like we got our sports votes because Rob was a wonderful chap.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yes. Dan confirmed it's 120 for the priest. So there you go.
But yeah, PSA Stormcast players, play more dragon. It's all about the dragon, boys.
I've been
and girls.
saying that for a while.
It is.
The dragon is so good.
Like, oh my god.
Yeah, he's good.
I've played probably 40 games and it's died maybe only 6 times.
I personally want the next, I want that next Stormcast book, and I want them to redo the battalions, keep the battalion with 3 of the Templars, but actually have that model be worth its good. And make that battalion have a good ability, and give me an excuse to go buy 3 Star Drakes. Look, GW, there's money on the table here if you make it worth it, because I will run that army.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have one painted.
They're gorgeous. That's one of the models high up on the list of when you first see the photo. Many of us had first seen that photo with that, the leg kind of awkward armor plate placement, but you see it in person. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Cool.
Yeah, it's fun to paint too.
Tom, what are you working on?
Dwarves, but
surprise.
I decided to do an evaluation of my collection and figure out, because we had I've been able to piece together KO stuff the last month, 2 months or whatever, just with what I had, but it's come time for me to fix my numbers. I had a lot of unbuilt or partially built Arco, and so to make sure that I have a thermatic gunner and a whatever their face in each unit, and so to mess with my numbers in order to make sure the distribution's right on all of them. So I've been doing that, and then I finally I needed to look at my Thunderers because I had a bunch of bodies and partially open boxes and partially built stuff. And so this week I built my last Thunder, the last one that I own that was unassembled. He has been built. And
that was
I think
55 Thunderers or something total.
That was 55 Thunderers. Now, to be clear, 20 of those have been converted into Hammerers. But I have an actual 35 Thunderers, and I'm probably going to buy another 5. So I'm pretty sure that my next order that I put in with Mini Stomp will be 5 more Thunderers to round out those numbers.
Nice.
To get to a nice 40. So
cool.
So yeah, and then I've been basing a bunch of old dispossessed, trying to figure out what I want to do with those, rebasing, and a bunch of Thunderers that I'm going to use maybe as handgunners, and miners that I'm going to probably convert over to be Shadow Warriors. And so I don't know, we'll see. But I wanted to get all of my dwarves built and done, because the plan is within the next month and a half, I might start a new army project. And so what I'm going to do with that is, I think I'm going to leave it up to the community as to what I start next. And so once I have a clear picture of what Lumineth looks like, and if it's something that I can stomach, that'll determine if they end up on the ballot or not. And so we'll so look for that probably beginning of May. I'm guessing mid-April or beginning of May. So we'll see.
You'll be all in. Just get your head swaps ready.
I mean, I already know what head swaps I'm going to do. If I do it, I have enough elf heads and stuff like that, a bunch of Sisters of the Watch, that I could make it work. But regardless, I don't know. I have some other ideas too, so we'll see.
Cool. For myself, I decided with this, not leaving my house much, which is a big change for me.
Huge.
Liar.
I didn't leave my house I don't leave my house before. But it's time to take my medicine with my Tempest, with my Whirlwind's Edge force. So I'm working on 10 bikers for the other 10 of my Pistoliers. This project has taken longer than I wanted because I've been it's actually really time consuming to paint all these dudes, and two because I had to work with all those stats, but they're almost done now. I need to weather out the bikes and then finish up the bases. I've got 10 bikes and 10 bikers, and all my little bikers are nice combinations of various kinds of like techie bits and classic bits. There's no way this is gonna show, but like here's a little classic dude with he's got little tech weird admech legs and body, but he has like a little pistolier helmet and old-timey pistols. I have a more classic knight with a shotgun. You know, all the fun stuff. Because knights with shotguns are cool. So I tried to mix them up like that. And then I'll have enough to actually run the Tempest Eye battalion if I want, of the 3 units of pistoliers. You know, the other unit that you can take in that battalion, why, that's 0 to 2 gun haulers. So I also had to make up my custom gun hauler, which I made right here for it. So again, going with the same aesthetic of all the different sort of boilers that have been put in. And I'm excited to paint this guy. I love kit bashing these weird vehicles. It's a lot of fun. So
Hey,
yeah.
Vince?
Yeah, man.
Can you add images to your poll?
Can I add images to my poll? Yes.
Yeah, like
can you?
do
Yes,
those,
I can. When I do a survey now, yes, I can have an image in it. Yes.
Okay, just curious.
Thinking of future surveys you want to run, Tom?
I mean, if you have it, and you need to get your money, I may use that as my survey tool.
Sure, that's fine. Wait, look, let's get the use out of it, okay? That's all I'll say.
I mean, if you paid for it.
Yeah, every new survey is more worth money than I had to pay there. So yeah, exactly. Okay.
So how many points are you up to?
So once these get done, right? 450 or 350 there with all the pistoliers and the gun hauler, and then otherwise I have about 1,400. So this will put me up to like maybe 17ish, 50 total. So I have 2 steam tanks. No, more than that, 2,000. This will put me to 2,000. Sorry, I have 2 steam tanks. A big KO ship, an ironclad, a free guild general and griffin. I've got the prime time. I've got 5 other bikers, and I've got 3 gyrocopters. So
cool, nice.
Yeah. So it's coming right along. I just need to think of what else I want to add when the AdMech stuff comes out. So there you go.
Well, just seek out Coach for some advice on playing that top tier Tempest Eye army. He tore up those tables last weekend.
I'm not sure that's actually what happened.
Right,
but
right, Coach?
He had an okay
I
weekend.
thought he tore it up.
I am not going to comment.
Oh,
Poor Coach.
He's the coach.
I'm going to point to the review I did of his list with Doom and suggest if you want to know what my thoughts were and something that actually reflected the reality of what happened, go watch my review.
Yeah. Just give him crap. He definitely had a soft list.
He did, but it used an Ice Queen. Used the Frost Queen from the old whatever they're called.
Kislev?
The Kislev models. Yeah. I have one sitting around here in a box as well. I don't know what to do with her because she's this crazy mono pose metal, but I've always saved her just in case I wanted a mounted queen model. So
nice.
Yeah, it's a nice model. I'm glad you used it.
She's a great model, dude. I used her for a couple different things. All right, so gentlemen, you ready to talk some stats?
Let's do it.
Okay. Who's ready for PowerPoint? Yeah. Woo!
No, wait. We're not going to be able to see this, are we?
You have to be watching the show. Yes, you're going to need to bring the show, but we won't be able to see you.
Yeah, isn't it the worst?
That's high tech. Wow.
Like he should have just let me do it. Like that's what should have happened. Is he should have just let me do it, and then everybody could watch it.
Yeah, because letting you do things on this show clearly has worked out in the past.
I mean, it's the solution.
So the first thing I'm going to do is make myself smaller here so I don't block any of the data.
Yeah.
Then we'll bring this up, and we'll go into a little presentation mode. Oh, 6. All right. Swap. There we go. Minimize that. Now I should be up in the corner. Okay. So, there we go. Now I'm just a little box in the corner. And people can't see you.
Sweet. I can get naked.
Okay. Don't do that. I wish I don't have many animations or transitions. Sorry, folks. This is just like... This is pretty bare bones as far as presentations go, okay? It's the data I was more interested in. I didn't have a lot of time to make this fancy. But here we go. So this was based on the survey that that came in that everybody was nice enough to fill out. If you filled out the survey, thank you. So it was about 900 survey respondents. Obviously, as all things, we'll talk about correlation. It's hard to ever draw causation. This was specifically targeted at ranges that had a model released during Age of Sigmar, either 1.0 or 2.0. Model ranges that had only a single model, such as a single hero in a box, were excluded, and all respondents were asked to consider only the models, but there is no way to enforce that. So, just a quick note on assumptions and risks. Okay? Cool. We're all on the page. Interesting stuff. Now let's get to the fun stuff. Oh, that's cut off. Well, that's not very nice.
Womp, womp, womp.
There we go. Now you can see it. I switched it around. Okay, cool. So now people can actually see the numbers. And by the way, I'll figure out a way to share all of this.
By the way, it's my chosen way to view PowerPoint, Emily. No, continue.
Sure. Oops. No, we skipped slides. There we go. Sorry.
I don't know if you have... Oh, well, okay. As usual, what's the why here? Why did you do this in the first place?
Yeah, it's a great question. I want to see if I can. I need to reorient this a little bit. I can't put it in actual presentation mode because otherwise it cuts off part of the screen for everybody.
Yeah.
There we go. Let's see if I can get it to a point where we'll be able to see it nice and big. Okay, there we go. And I'll shrink this side down because I don't need that. Sorry, folks. I didn't realize in presentation mode it was going to cut off that side of my screen, and I want to make sure everybody can actually see this stuff. Okay, there we go. That looks a lot better.
Can you hide the sidebar?
I can minimize it way down.
Oh no, cover me up.
There you go. Okay. So this is as close to presentation mode as I can get because if I put it in Preso mode, it takes my full screen, and OBS doesn't actually capture the full screen. All right. So at any rate, overall statistics. Oh, start with the why. Why did I do this? Yeah, it's a great question, Tyler. So I became interested in this actually because of a political thing. Okay, this isn't like a politics show, but just to kind of let everybody in on what my thinking was here. There was an interesting factoid that I heard that's come up a couple different times at different points in like the primaries, which is basically like, as a simple example, they asked people like, would you vote for a woman for president? And most respondents said yes. And then they said, do you think other people would vote for a woman for president? So like the majority answer to that question was yes. Fine enough. And then they said, do you think your friends and neighbors or people you know or people in your town, or there's several different times the survey was run, would vote for a woman for president? And the majority answer was like, no. Okay. So the point here was everybody is actually like quite fine with this, but everybody thinks everybody else is not. Does that make sense? There's a perception bias here, right? And so one of the things I wanted to dig in on, amongst many other things, I wanted to know how successful have the ranges that have been released in AOS been. But I was also interested to know, like, is there a perception bias? Do people think everyone else thinks armies are different than what they actually are?
Yeah.
Okay. And the answer is yes. Yes, they do. All ranges, every single range that's been released had a lower personal score than a group score. So let me unpack that. When you asked somebody, what did you think of the army? They answered a lower number than it on average, on a weighted average, than what they thought everybody else thinks of the army. To put it as simple as possible, all of us think everyone else likes armies more than they do. Okay?
Gotcha.
So you can see it over here on the side where I have this all sort of in a stacked chart, and we'll dig into it later. But then we'll break out this data in lots of different ways. But if you look at like Stormcast's weighted average was 5.57, which puts them toward the bottom. Okay. When asked, what do you think of Stormcast? When the question was, what do you, how successful overall do you think the model line is, or how much do you think everybody else likes it, right? It was 6.43, right? But the point is, we got enough respondents on the personal level that we can say that's probably not true. Now, 900 certainly is a long way from the entire community, but it's probably statistical significance, right? Because everybody answered all the questions. So, I mean, I didn't calculate out the P of it, but it's probably statistical significance, eyeballing it. So, that's fascinating to me that bias is there. I mean, anybody thoughts on that? That everybody thinks everybody else likes armies more than they actually do?
Well, that just suggests to me that there's a positivity bias and doesn't actually reflect people's actual perspective on the armies.
No, 100%. It's a positivity bias. Yeah, I agree.
Sorry, I was going to be Starkey. Continue.
That's fine. I think it's absolutely pointing toward there being a positivity bias. Again, it's hard to ever draw a complete conclusion, right? But it's certainly evidence to a positivity bias.
Yeah.
So when you go all inclusive, the ranges were 7.15 to 4.39 at the low end. And I will say that if you look at the bottom two, they're both Fire Slayers. Both, nobody liked, or I shouldn't say nobody. We'll get it. We'll look at the individual army statistics later. Fire Slayers were very unpopular and aesthetically. And people don't think anybody else likes them either on average. Right? Like, in general, they still had higher. It was still a bump, but it wasn't a huge bump. So...
yeah, like going into this, I would have guessed Fire Slayers would be at the bottom and Iron Jaws would be near the top.
Which is
in terms of just aesthetics.
Sure, and on the all-inclusive weighted average, that was true, but the winner overall of like single respondents was Gits.
Okay.
Gits, that they were the highest. Like, what do you personally think of the army? And Gits got a 6.98. They were the highest personal response,
which is fascinating because they're probably one of the least changed armies from a Warhammer Fantasy.
Well, I think they got a lot of successful models that integrated in, but it's interesting because the top three, as you can see from this, we could go to the top four or whatever, because there are four in a row: Gits, Iron Jaws, Night Haunt, and Slaves to Darkness.
Yeah, those are all of those that basically have unchanged models.
I don't know about your real. I mean, it's hard for me to say that Iron Jaws and Night Haunt are like that. Iron Jaws has one model in the range from Warhammer Fantasy.
Right, but the aesthetic is almost identical, just bigger and bulkier.
Sure. It's a very strong evolution on a concept. I mean, I don't know that you would necessarily say a brute is completely derivative of an Ardboy. There's a lot of differences there. The armor's much more beaten. It's much more shapely. The weapons are quite different. Like, there are significant aesthetic differences. But, nonetheless, people still liked it. And felt like it was... I think what that's saying, Tom, is it seems to be pointing toward evidence that you're right. It was a successful evolution. How about that?
Sure.
And, again, Night Haunt has what, like... 3 units that they kept: the Karn Wraith, the Banshee, and the Spirit Host, and then everything else was new. Is that right?
Yeah.
Did I miss anything? Oh, I guess technically we could grandfather in the
Hex Wraith.
Oh, right.
No,
Hex
you're
Wraith.
right. I'm sorry. The Hex Wraith is 4, and then I was going to grandfather in the Morngul. So there you go.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So interesting stuff here. All right.
Okay.
Cool. Any other thoughts?
Yep.
Cool.
So I don't know if you want to get it. Maybe you have a format here, but I was going to ask, what were some of the hypotheses that you had going into this? Like, what would be some of your predictions? And
that's a great question. What were some of them? Let's do. Yeah, that's a fair point. I was predicting that people would hate Fire Slayers, and I was right. I thought Slaanesh would do a lot better than it did. It did not. It did not do well. It is, in fact, 3rd from the bottom on personal rating.
Right, okay. Which is weird, right?
Yeah, that's surprising.
Well, you'll
Like,
see when we get into the
I
individuals.
argue I would argue those were some of the most beautiful models they've ever released.
So, KO is kind of right in the middle. I thought they would have rated higher. I knew they'd be very Marmite, but I would have thought they'd come in a little bit higher. But that being said, like, KO still came in at 643, which that's a 1.5 higher, plus higher than the lowest thing, right? And only 0.75-ish off of the highest thing. Does that make sense? So they're still, like, yes, they're the median army, but they're above average.
Yeah. Did you think much? I don't remember talking with you about this to the degree. Well, I think it's difficult to try and correct for what's going on in people's heads, other than doing your best to make it abundantly, as clear as you can what the goal is of this survey, which I thought you did a good job with. But in terms of like Slaanesh, for example, of course we had the shelve Slaanesh, ban Slaanesh. We had a healthy period there where Slaanesh was disliked by many people, and so maybe that is some bias that's impacting. Yeah, like how Sylvaneth with the Wildwoods and people's disdain of, or at least many people's disdain of having to play with a bunch of woods to play that army in the first place. Like, how much does that potentially bias it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think when we get to the individual armies, I think that's worth a discussion, right? Like, it could, has the bias of like getting kicked in the teeth repeatedly by an army, has it influenced people's sort of overall appreciation of the aesthetic?
Right.
Okay. Hard to say. Okay, so next slide. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that perception delta. So this slide digs in on the perception delta a little. So this is the difference between personal perception and group perception. The highest delta is Slaanesh. Okay. As a unfortunate point of fact, people don't actually seem to like Slaanesh very much in our survey. Like, it got a 5.36. As I said, it's third from the bottom. Okay. But when answered, what do you think everybody else thinks of Slaanesh? Right? The, like, way higher answer, 6.66. It's a 1.3 jump. Like, that is a huge delta on 900 answers, right?
Clearly, Vince, you've influenced the community to love the aesthetic, to think that everybody else loves the aesthetics of Slaanesh.
I mean, obviously I'm the one who put out the survey, and I rave about Slaanesh a lot, so, you're not wrong. But at the same time, the second place, as you can see from the chart here, is OBR, who has still higher than a 1 perception delta difference. And I wouldn't say I've been super kind to OBR. Again, OBR did not great, 5.39, coming in just above Slaanesh on people actually liking the aesthetic. So again, like, it's one of the lower respondents by far, like fourth from the bottom. But yet people think, like, well, the community clearly loves OBR as a whole, right? And
so what I'm hearing you say is that if you want to get positive votes from people for painting scores in composition, choose the armies that are perceived highest by the community.
Ironjaws, Slaves to Darkness, Night Haunt, Gits. Yeah, exactly. Like, people love the aesthetic and will have a sort of generically positive response to the army. Yes.
In other news, 3 of the 5 armies that I'm looking at running are in that top list.
Don't worry, Coach. You could only complete the survey once. It was locked. Like, you could only enter everybody can only respond to the survey one time. The other interesting points to pull out of here are Sylvaneth and Gits, who have both had an extremely low perception delta, 0.17. Sylvaneth themselves were 633 and 65. So overall, pretty middle of the pack, to be honest. But most people think they're pretty middle of the pack. Like, there's very little gap. Everybody thinks, like, yeah, they're good. Like, personally, they all think, yeah, they're good. And I think everybody else thinks, yeah, they're good. Right? Like, that's
acceptable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I suspect for some of these armies, these factions that have been out for a while, some of them would be different, or potentially quite different, if we had done the survey in 2016 when Sylvaneth came out. for example.
Sure.
At least that would be my guess, in the sense of when Sylvaneth came out in 2016. Like, I mean, again, as usual, heavy potential for bias, but my general impression is that they were well regarded, quite well regarded in the community. A lot of interest in that army, with the existing aesthetics, and then what we saw with Kurnoth. Everybody loved Kurnoth hunters. They were and still are an incredible model. Ilarial was one of those first big kits that came out, showing really GW flexing their muscles with Age of Sigmar. It was absolutely extraordinary. It still holds. So I just wonder if some of these that have been out for a while might have tapered off relative to what score they would have gotten when they came out.
It's a great question.
Yep. And it is true, and it's obviously something I can't really, correct for, because it'd be very hard to regress out.
Yeah.
Now, what I'll say is that the interesting part about this to me, okay, is that held against each other, it's interesting when you look at the difference between sort of against a theoretically objective score. That is to say, if you just hold it against the 1 to 10 rating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of these are pretty middle packed, right? Like, in general, there's the only army that got less than a 5. So let's call it less than average or whatever, right? If 5 is to be the average. The only army that got less than that was Fyreslayers, right? So it's the only one that seems to that everybody seems to agree, like, yeah, that's kind of a failure, right? So if you hold like the 6-3-3 of Sylvaneth against that, that's pretty good on a survey of this many people to still come in there. That says it's pretty broad appeal, right?
That's true. Yeah, no, that's very true. Yeah.
It's just, but when you put it against more of the subjective or the comparative matrix, it gets a lot different, right? Like they're pretty middle-roaded. So.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an important point, because just looking at these numbers, it would be helpful to understand what you think should be some of the high-level takeaways. And you just hinted, or just kind of laid out one of those elements as, in terms of how we should be anchoring ourselves, how we should be thinking about these numbers overall.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you're right. Like, definitely Sylvaneth from that standpoint. Yeah, it's pretty good.
So it is interesting. Like, we'll obviously do a summation at the end, but I think that there's I think there's a lot of interesting stuff here. And no Des, there was no Skaven because there was no new Skaven released in AOS.
Like no
other
new,
than the
like
Bombardier.
Yeah, so like because this was about the aesthetics of new models.
Correct.
Yeah.
And they only had one model.
Right. Yep. Okay. What I was specifically testing for here is, have the AOS army releases been successful, and how have they been received? Right. So there you go. Oh, thank you. Dan pointed out the Underworlds guys. Okay, I'm not counting Underworlds warbands either.
No, they're not in the book.
I don't remember if those guys are in the book or not. They might.
No, they didn't. Like, they didn't even get added to the book. That was the scandal.
Yeah, I'm not counting Underworld's warbands. Like, I'm trying to hit things that actually had at least a significant part of their standard model range. I had to cut this somewhere, folks, because the problem is Skaven have 70 War Scrolls. Those two, if I say evaluate Skaven, you're not evaluating Skaven based on those 2 War Scrolls. Right. Okay. Next up. So this is fun. Here we'll get more into here I broke these apart so the top 2 are your personal ranking spreads by score and then by count as per who selected what, 1 through 10, right? And the bottom is your group ranking, 1 through 10. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So what's fascinating to me here is, obviously, like I said, personal ranking is universally lower when you look, up and down, right? Also, there are switches. Like on the personal ranking, Gits come at the top, but on the grouping ranking, Ironjaws come at the top. So Gits and Ironjaws flip. On the personal rankings, KO are sort of KO, Nurgle, Nighthaunt, all this stuff kind of bounces around some. That's my point. Sorry. Like Nighthaunt and S2D flip between those two as well. So it's fascinating how those deltas actually match out. But the other thing that really interested me was, I look at the actual vote tally. Yeah. So the vote sum spread when people are voting for themselves, right? And it's not it's not a perfect bell curve. Like people are much more willing to tail the curve to vote 1 and 10,
Yeah.
right? So when you look at it, there's this tail up at 1 and 10 that have a very large number of votes, right?
Right.
Again, these are roll-ups over all the votes over all armies, right? And when you look at the vote sum spread for the group, you know, how you're thinking about other people voting, it's almost a perfect bell curve, right? Not exactly perfect, but it does track correctly, right? You don't get the weird bounce tails. So everybody naturally thinks of everybody else as a bell curve, right? Like that's what the sort of emergent property is. When we try to think about other people, we think in bell curves. We think in our own personal response. People were much more willing to give 1s and 10s on their personal responses than they were on how they think other people think about it. Yes.
Yeah.
So in addition to like a positivity bias, there's a moderation bias.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. When I was filling out this survey, I remember thinking about that like it doesn't almost ever it never seemed appropriate to consider giving any of these releases a 1 because of what that would represent. And I was also extremely hesitant to give a 10 to anything. I don't think I gave a 10 to anything. I gave a couple of 9s, but that doesn't seem to track with what a lot of others did. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, still, when you look at it, I mean, it's a simple comparison. People are much less likely when they're thinking in terms of averages. Like this is what I think the average of the community is talking about. It's easy to understand that you'd be like, well, the average probably isn't a 1 or a 10, right? It's kind of the inference you would expect when people start making that kind of a logical inference, right?
Right.
990 people were willing to give a 1 on their personal, but only 138 gave a 1 when they thought, how does the rest of the world think about it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Which I think logically tracks, again, because you slip into a sort of different mode, right?
Yep.
So cool stuff there. Any other thoughts on this one, gentlemen? This one's pretty straightforward, just more of a derivation of the previous slides.
Yeah, KO is surprisingly a little higher than I would have thought or might have expected by the general sense of communal response over the years to KO. Might have expected it to be a little lower than it is, but that could be maybe a positive sign in terms of folks really responding to the goal of assessing by model aesthetics.
Yeah.
Without too much correlation with rules or play style or that sort of thing in terms of the misses of that battle tome originally.
It's fascinating to me the how flat a lot of this is, and then how much Fire Slayers just drop like a rock.
Yeah,
like it is very, very, very strongly. You see the curve so much stronger in the group ranking, where
totally.
the lowest group ranking outside of Fire Slayers is 6.2, and then all of a sudden just wham, like a 1.5 falls off, right?
Yeah.
Compared to the personal ranking where it's a 1.
Don't like Fire Slayer aesthetics.
It seems to be the case, yes.
Which, like, man, that sucks for me.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's definitely. Well, I was going to say it's really well. I mean, it's kind of an obvious statement, but it's certainly really borne out over the years in the low percentage of folks playing the army relative to the power level of that army, especially in more recent months.
Yeah.
But I mean, Fire Slayers were quite solid prior to Hearthguard going to 24,400, and we still saw a very low percentage being played.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's clear that this kind of stuff matters, right? It's also clear to me that as long as you can end up in sort of the good group, right? Like, if you can end up hitting that curve, then other things can take over, right? Is what I would say is my
What do you mean by that?
If you can hit a certain point on the curve, right? And we'll talk about how the curve matters and how it can also, how when you dig in, the devil's in the details, right? But if you can average to a certain point on the curve, then other things can start to also influence how much you see that get played. Like, are the rules good? Are the
Sure. I
how
gotcha.
cheap is it? How easy is it to get the army, play the army, right? Fire
Yeah.
Slayers has classically been both sometimes kind of expensive, often kind of expensive, and also, of varying rules quality. And then combine that with clearly an aesthetic that people were not generally a fan of, and you've got a real challenge on your hand, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Great point.
Okay. So this one's fun. This is our number of 1 votes by army and our number of 10 votes by army. In other words, the people who selected 1 and the people who selected 10. Okay.
Okay.
So here you can see, like, so who's getting the most 1s? The answer is, and this is going to be real relevant later. You'll see when we go to when we get to the next slide, because I'll do some comparative stuff here. Fire Slayers by far winning this with the number of 1s. 136 people voted that they're only a 1. Slaanesh coming in second place. And then third place, out of nowhere, Nurgle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty shocking.
I mean, is it though?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, that's definitely must be an area where I would have thought Nurgle would have been more in the middle, would not have seen that much skew. But I don't know. Why do you think that's not surprising, Tom?
Are you thinking, Tom? We can't see you thinking.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Some people, I think part of it is that some people have tryptophobia, like Vince does.
Sure.
And there's just like a visceral reaction to it. Like,
Yeah.
Sure.
And so some people just don't like the gross.
Sure.
They don't. And so I think that, so they react. So I think they're more likely to draw those ones.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is measuring extreme reactions, right? That's what this page is doing. And what fascinates me about this is obviously Nurgle and OBR are statistically equivalent, 98 and 97, right? Like there's no statistical difference there. So a lot of people were willing to throw 1 votes at OBR as well. And when you look at this, like you had asked the question about getting kicked in the face.
Right.
Well, Fire Slayers, Slaanesh, and OBR are all boogeymen to some degree, right? All 3 of them have some kind of arguable NPE at various points in their history, right?
Yeah.
Negative play experience. Nurgle has mostly not, right? Like, Nurgle, for the most part, has been pretty fair and fine to play
unless
against.
you play Tom, but yeah.
Sure. I mean, like, but that was still, like, Tom's weird thing going way, 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 way back, right? Like,
very few
Nurgle
people
got
had
a book.
to play that except to the 2 of you and a couple others.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even so, that was more of almost a Slaves to Darkness thing, because that was pre-Maggotkin, right?
Right.
So it's
chaos.
Sure. It's fascinating to me that that's up there. At the same time, the people who got the lowest number of 1 votes are kind of exactly what you would expect. Like Gitz, Slaves to Darkness, Nighthaunt.
Sylvaneth coming in there, only 37.
Yeah, absolutely. It's right up there in that chart. Like people, there aren't a lot of haters. If this is measuring your haterade, right?
Right.
And Sylvaneth don't have a lot of haters. There's not a lot of people who are just like, no, Sylvaneth is awful, right? Because that's if you're throwing a 1 at it, you think that army's awful.
Yeah.
Aesthetically, it's the worst.
Right. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I get Stormcast. I mean, kind of for obvious reasons. Certainly, that was a long-standing narrative, particularly early on in AOS.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still some of that lingering that's out there. You know, some folks, just don't like the aesthetic. That's fair. But yeah, I can definitely see some potential bias with OBR, Slaanesh, and Fire Slayers in terms of the kick in your face, getting your face kicked in, influencing those numbers potentially.
Sure.
Especially OBR and Slaanesh. I don't know, OBR and Slaanesh. I get Fire Slayers. I don't get OBR and Slaanesh.
Well, so let me say this as well. Go ahead, Tom.
I mean, I get OBR. Like, I hate the aesthetic. Like, as is, I hate it. So let me get this straight. It's like bones, like skeletons shaped out of bones, wearing bones. Like, is that where we're at? Because that's what the army is.
I don't
was a
think
little bit.
Meth's in the audience tonight because he would be popping
yeah.
off right now, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I get and especially if there's an expectation of like more Tomb Kings like aesthetics. Like I can understand people could have reacted less than positive to the Joker skeleton army.
I seem to recall we did have a fair amount of negative reactions during the slow burn preview of OBR that were going around. So yeah, that could be fair.
Maybe they only slow burn armies that are aesthetically not so hot.
I don't know. So let's look at the number of 10 votes. Let's move over to the right side, okay? Because this is also interesting to me. There's a couple different points I want to draw everybody's attention to here. One, obviously, your big winner on 10 votes were Gits. They were a big winner there at 151, with Iron Jaws not far behind, and then Night Haunt and KO in a statistical dead heat, right at for third place. So fascinating to me that KO still, like, when you talk about people who this is people who are like ride or die. They love this army. They love this aesthetic. When you personally vote a 10, like, it hits for you, right?
Yeah.
That's what's going to motivate you up to hit a 10, right?
I can't think of another army that scores higher on influencing the rating when you see them in person than KO. At least for me, certainly, KO is probably the top of that list. Looking at the pictures and actually seeing them in person, yeah, they're pretty incredible.
Yep,
they're better with Fireslayer Mohawks.
True.
The other thing that I want to draw people's attention to is that Nurgle number on 10 votes, which is not in like the top 5, but it's the next one down. It's the 6th place, right? It's still quite high, over 100, 109, which is you're gonna see how this manifests in the next slide when we get to some interesting breakdowns, okay? But like, also Nurgle has a lot of adherent diehard fans, right? So Nurgle gets a lot of love and a lot of hate, which I thought was real interesting. The other thing I'll say is that when you talk about sort of moderation bias, this chart really calls out, if you look at the actual numbers, most people, when they thought of what everyone else thinks because of the positivity bias, there were very, very low responses on, I think everybody else thinks this is a 1, right? Like only 3 people, thought that everybody else thinks Sylvaneth is a 1.
Yeah.
Right? That's basically nobody, right? That might as well say 0. Okay. Not to discount you 3 people who responded.
And if you are one of those 3, Vince just called you a nobody.
No, I'm just saying it's more or less statistically equivalent to 0, right? On this number of responses. However, a lot of people were willing to say, yeah, I think other people think this is a 10. Right?
Yeah.
Like the delta between the personal and the group is much lower on, like, there's an order of magnitude difference in many cases on or nearly in the 1 votes personal to group. But there's only about a 50% often in the personal to group of 10s, right? 88 people still think everybody else, or the average of everybody else is everybody thinks Ironjaws is a 10, which I agree with. More people thought that everybody loves Ironjaws than they thought everybody loves Gits, although that's right behind it. So.
Yep. I can see that. Because Ironjaws are just sexy. I mean,
they really are.
Yeah.
It's a great model line.
It absolutely is. I want to shout out here the 7 people who thought that the overall impression of Fire Slayers was a 10. These 7 heroes who are blinded by an unbelievable bias to these wonderful little naked bearded man.
I was not one of those 10, to be clear. But I was not far beyond that. I quite like the aesthetic because I felt like it transferred the Slayers from the old world over fairly well.
Okay, fair enough.
So I'm going to defend my midget lovers.
All right, next up. So here's where we get to the Marmite rating and the meh rating. Okay.
Yeah.
Which are
in case, explain Marmite.
Marmite, yeah. So Marmite's like a sort of, it's a UK / the greater British world thing of like Marmite is classically this thing that you either love or you hate, right?
Right.
There's no middling opinion on Marmite. You either absolutely love it or you absolutely hate it.
Yep.
So hence what we're looking at here is a comparative around the 1s and 10s, like but those put together from a personal and group point on a single chart. And what immediately jumps out to you is that Nurgle is the Marmitiest faction, right? Because they have the closest combination of only 9 votes apart of 1s and 10s. Like, so the 1s are orange and the 10s are turquoise in this one, right? It's fascinating to me that Nurgle hit that mark, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You either love it or you hate it.
Right, right. Other close contenders with, which had very close number-wise but didn't have as many votes, not as extreme opinions, were like Tzeentch and Khorne. Also were like very close to each other but didn't get the same high vote count. A lot less people were willing to rate them 1s or 10s overall. So they tended to be more middle grouped, right? There you go.
Yeah. Yep.
So I thought that was pretty fascinating. It doesn't come out as much in the grouping because if you look at the group rating, everybody thinks people love Nurgle way more than they do. Right?
Let's see. Nurgle.
Nurgle, 42 people said yes.
Oh, wow.
People rate Nurgle as a 10. Only 8 said they rate him as a 1. The reality is they're much more Marmitey than they are, than people perceive them to be. Right? Okay. So that's the Marmite rating. The meh rating. Meh. Right? Meh is 5s. Okay? Meh is like when you that you've got a 5. And so this is just a count of the 5 votes. And so who is your kings of the middle ground?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Is that? Yeah, I can hear you. Hello?
Okay.
Yeah, he's back now.
Oh,
okay. Was he? Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Sorry. I think it skipped for a minute and slowed down, but we're back now. I'm watching it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, there we go. We're back. Let me reconnect to Tom.
Paint it up.
Hey, guys.
For your... Hey.
All right. We're back. Sorry, my internet died for a moment. Stream. Hold on.
Just sharing that I saw Ford vs. Ferrari yesterday, and it was actually quite a good film.
Yeah, I dug it.
Okay, there we go. Hopefully it's reconnected. It says it is.
Oh.
Let's see if it actually will come back up here. Okay, chat's back. There you go. Yay! We're back.
We were just talking about how this is probably going to be a very Marmite episode. Yeah. Some people are going to be like, really?
The chat was not real happy about the episode. It's pretty boring, so you need to spice it up, Vince.
Okay, I'm working on it.
Need some sex appeal on the stats.
All right. Well, we're getting there, man. We're getting there. Don't worry. All right, folks. Sorry about that. My internet just decided to die for no reason.
Not mine. Not mine. Mine's fine.
No, literally just my internet died. Like, I don't know what to tell you, folks. Okay. Anywho, we're back. So, we were moving on to the meh rating. I love how you talk about spicing it up. And we get to the meh. This is just like... This is the armies that everybody was just like 5s, nothing, no emotions either way, right? Like they couldn't be bothered, right?
So what I was asking is, do you think that that's actually fair in terms of the anchoring? Is 5 an actual meh in terms of the anchoring for this, in your opinion?
My answer would be yes, because if it didn't spark that, it didn't produce either a love or a hate. It just produced a, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. I guess, and a different way to phrase it is, how should GW take that? Should they be, like, is that incredibly acceptable, seeing a lot of factions in that 5 range? Or is that falling short?
Well, it says to me that they're playing it safe on those factions. Would you agree with that, Vince?
Yeah, I mean, I think what that says is that, and some of the winners here in this category were surprising to me, right? You'll see a little bit clearer picture when we look at the individual army groupings. I've got some samples of that, right? But the Mark Rosewater gave a talk where he said the worst thing you can do in game design is produce a product that if you ask everybody to rate, they give it like a 5 or a 6.
Okay.
Right? Because that's not going to be a successful product. You want like 70% of the people to give it a 8 or 8 through 10, and 30% of the people to give it a 1 or a 2.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because that tells you you're provoking strong responses from people. Right?
Right.
So the Metist armies in personal response are Khorne and Daughters of Cain. What?
Oh, wow.
What?
They're just boring.
So somebody asked in the comments how many total votes. It's about 900 respondents total to the survey. So there you go. It's out of about 900 votes.
It's pretty lame. Like they're just pretty, ladies in bikinis just not doing it for me.
Sure. So in other words, out of about 900 people that answered, 132 of those gave Khorne a 5, right? Which is a fairly decent percentage, right? Okay. Comparatively, when you look at, say, Gitz getting a 69 or KO getting 68, right? Like it's a notable difference. So yeah. Somebody asked, is there any difference in sales between a rating of a 6 and a 1? That's a piece of data.
You don't have the sales data. It'd be fascinating to look at.
It would be. This is just the models, by the way, for people who are joining late. Hello, everybody. Sorry, we were offline for a moment. But yes, this is just the models. People were asked to evaluate based on the aesthetics of the models alone. Now, I can't enforce that. I have no way of knowing what people's biases or what they took into account in their voting, but that was the ask. So there you go. Yeah, and I think probably the part of the answer there of Khorne and Doc, and it's something of what W. Soren just said, which is they're very samey factions, right?
Yep.
Where just like a lot of the line is kind of just the same stuff. Like Doc is a lot of chicks in bikinis, just murder chicks in bikinis, right? Khorne is a lot of just like barbarian dudes running forward with axes named Blood something, right? Who are all just like muscly, often shirtless dudes, right?
Yeah.
So it's like the all-bro army and the all-chick army.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I hadn't thought about that, but yes, you're right. Yeah, that's funny. Yes. Now what everybody else thought was meh obviously doesn't map to that, right? You get a very uneven spread in the meh rating, personally, but when you look at a group, you get a much more sort of distinct trend line. And I will say Khorne was pretty correct. A lot, Khorne's pretty high up there, and a lot of people thought Khorne was pretty middle of the road, and it was. So not too surprising. But a lot of people thought Fire Slayers were pretty, that everybody else thought Fire Slayers were pretty meh.
Yeah.
Which it actually reflects a positivity bias. Given that this is a 5 and their actual rating was below 5, right? This is sort of people giving them extra credit. For else, this is dragging their score down. Except for Fire Slayers. This is pushing their score up. This is their high end of their curve. Right? Okay.
Over the years.
I don't know.
Oh, come on.
All right, I think you're back.
I'm back. Yes, that one was just a little hiccup. Okay. What were you going to say, Tom? I'm sorry.
I don't remember.
All right. Okay. Let's keep going. Quick, let's spin through some individual army stats. This is what we've been champing at the bit for. I apologize. What we've been champing at the bit for, right? So, okay, individual army stats. And I'm watching it, and my stream just went like very bad on quality. Yeah. It'll catch up here in a minute. I promise everybody. I'm sorry. It's got to buffer it out. I don't know why my internet is so bad right now. I have no idea. There's nothing at all different about what's going on, and nobody's using a lot of internet in my house. But here we are. Okay. So it'll catch up. All right.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay, so individual army stats. I want to start by looking at some of the curves, because this is interesting. So what you've got here is in blue throughout all these stats. You'll have the army as rated on a personal, and the red is the army as the group rating. What do you think everybody else thinks? Make sense?
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So OBR is fascinating because they're a big difference, right? I talked about the positivity bias being very much in effect in this. So their weighted average was 5.39, but it really comes out when you look at the difference in the curve, right? Where look at how loaded the lower end of their chart is. 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, all very filled out. In fact, they have a very flat trend line all the way across, right?
Right.
Whereas, like, everybody else thinks, the perception of how they were received is that they have this great curve trending toward sort of, mostly positive at a 7. So I find that very fascinating. Like, this whole section of people is much less positive about OBR, and, like, there you go. Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So many in that, especially 5 to 8, 6 to 8 range in the group expectation. Huh.
Nurgle, much the same. So I put these two together because I thought they were two interesting examples of the same thing, right?
Yep.
So Nurgle's weighted average 5.76. Again, a lot of people thought that they curved out into the positive territory, and they have more positive than like OBR. If you look at the top end of their chart, the 8, 9, 10, they're certainly higher, right? There's more votes in that area, but they have a very aggressive low end of the chart as well, right? Like their 1, 2, 3, 4, and even 5 are quite robust, right? So
yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
5.39, 5.76. Cool. Yeah, that's fascinating.
All right. Let's look at the Fire Slayers, shall we? Okay. Fire Slayers have the most standard bell curve, basically, on what everybody thought of the group, and the most de-escalating linear trend line, right? Like, look at this. Like, whoop, just straight down would be the line you would draw compared to what everybody thinks, right?
Yeah.
Nobody else curved at the 5 point. Right? Overall weighted average 4.39. I mean, we've said it 100 times, but this one really brings it into like stark contrast that, like, yeah, this wasn't a very well received army, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's very evident from this.
And how egregious is that one of the first armies that they premiere was Fire Slayers?
Yeah. I mean, obviously Stormcast and Nighthaunt, or sorry, not Nighthaunt, Stormcast
and
and or whatever. And yes, but yes, Fire Slayers was one of the early ones out of the gate. Absolutely.
It's fascinating.
And then finally Slaanesh, which I mentioned before, also being like, what was fascinating to me here was just the unbelievable perception difference, right?
Right.
Like, people perceive Slaanesh as trending out very strongly at 6 to 8. Right. Whereas, as a point of fact, they trend out from 4 to 6. Right. Now, there is what saves Slaanesh and keeps it from Fire Slayer territory is this. Right. Is that, like, people like me who, like, I rated Slaanesh a 10 when I took my survey myself. I mean, I
think I rated
survey. Yeah. Because it just shows that, like, people will, there are, like, this army really hit for, let's call it tilde 9% of the population, 9-10% of the population, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Airdil asked, "What's the graph for?" We're going through the results, some interesting results of people's evaluation of the Age of Sigmar aesthetics from the survey that I posted up last week.
So what was your guys' personal and group predictions for Slaanesh?
Oh, that it would be way higher than this. I did not like this. This very much surprised me. Very much.
I would have been. It would have been like a 7.
A 7 personally, or what's
Well,
both
personally,
numbers?
I had much higher. Like personally, I had chosen like a 9 or a 10 on Slaanesh.
Okay, and then 7 in the Vince. What did you do?
I think I was 10 for personal response and 8 for group. I really thought it was like a well-loved thing. Right? Like I knew there were haters. I expected there to be a spike in the ones. That actually aligns well with my expectations, because I know that there's people who that really don't like the faction, right? And that's fine. Like, but I expected it to still trend way higher. Right?
Yeah.
I thought it would spark much more. I thought Slaanesh would spark much more bifurcated responses, an inverse bell curve, effectively.
Yeah. I think I was around like 6 or 7 personally, and then 7 or 8 collectively. But yeah, that's a little surprising.
Yep. Exactly. Okay. All right. Let's keep going. So now let's look into some positive curves, because this is kind of fascinating. So individual army stats, the Gits at a 6.98, right? These are all, by the way, based on the personal stats. So Gits at the highest. This is our highest rated one, right? And what you see is that, like, yes, people. What ended up happening here is this army hits a lot harder on the 9s and 10s than people predicted, right? That's what carries the whole faction way up, right? So people predicted, again, more of like a 7-8 curve, but in fact, there's tons of weight around 8, 9, 10.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a huge. I mean, that's a doubling.
Yeah.
151 to 76. Yeah, fascinating.
Yep. Exactly. The personal rating jumps way up over the other version.
Yeah.
Right? So I thought that was fascinating. Night Haunt, average rating of a weighted average of a 6.74. Same exact situation, right? People thought it would curve at like a 7-8, but in fact it was buoyed by this very strong response of 8, 9, 10, where its 9 and its 10 both beat its group predictions.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, really interesting.
Night Haunt.
Yeah, people. This was one that you asked, like, what was a surprise to me, Tyler?
Yeah.
Honestly, the Gits being this high surprised me, and the Night Haunt being this high knocked me out of my chair. Like, I was shocked that people. I did not realize people love the Ghosty Boys this much. Like, this army is beloved. That's because
I mean, the percentages have been fairly middling with Night Haunt for a while. In at least in the stats that we've got from LLV and company.
Right. But the only people that go events are those that love them.
Yeah. Gits, I'm not at all surprised. Like I would have guessed Gits and Iron Jaws number 1, Gits number 2 would have been my guess over all the factions. I mean, you guys remember when Gits came out? I mean, it was like universal love. Never seen that much universal love for an AOS faction. Then we saw, well, maybe Iron Jaws was the first one, but they were right up there.
Yeah.
The only thing that pulled me off the Gits train was the Daughters of Cain that dropped like 3 weeks later.
Yeah.
What's so interesting about this one to me is that in both of these cases, like less than 15% of the respondents gave this army less than a 5. Right? Either one of these.
Yeah.
Right? Like that is unbelievably successful to me.
Yeah, that's a really cool one. Seeing that, that's I think Night Haunt is a great example of some of the utility of this kind of data. Like I would not have expected that just based upon a general sense of communal opinion on Night Haunt. I would not have expected this data.
Yeah, I would have absolutely had a bias that this was not one of the more sort of community-wide accepted armies, right? As far as aesthetics go, but nope. Clearly, in fact, a big hit. So there you go.
Well, that Black Coach, let me tell you.
People love the Black Coach, and apparently people love most of the ghosts. And and this is an interesting also, like, a lot of people didn't love fighting 30 Grimghast Reefers or something, right? But that didn't seem to impact people's perception of the overall army. Or, by the way, do people love fighting maybe 60 packs of -3 to hit gobos?
Yeah.
But again,
Yeah.
so there you go. Okay, here's 2 more that I thought were interesting curve points. So KO. The reason I included KO in here is because they crushed on the 10. Right?
Yeah.
Like, there's more negative down there, and that's what ultimately brings them down. When you look at their sub 5 scores, right? It's more. Like, they have more than 200 respondents to the sub 5 score out of there. So it's a more significant percentage. But man, did they crush on the 10 score, right? Like
for those that landed, they really landed.
Yeah, like they beat their polls here, right? Like this is sort of the what do you think of the group would almost be like I've sort of combined a lagging and leading indicator here of sorts, right? Comparatively, like what do you think people are going to think is effectively what I was asking there, right? And in this case, KO crushed their polls, right? They beat expectations hard. Again, very strong on the 9 and 10. Honestly, very strong from like 7, 8, 9, 10. They really have just really, really strong responses. That tells me that, like, yeah, this army has endured despite years of often having just garbo rules.
Yeah.
People really do love this army. They think it's awesome.
Yeah, I know. Tom, you had some critiques of the new book for whatever the hell it's worth. I played a lot of KO over the last 3 months and played against them. And man, I just love that new book and how they play with the focus on the ships and the mobility and the spelling the bottle tricks. And anyway, I mean, that's a longer conversation. But in terms of at least a nice core center focal point, for that book and how it's supposed to play, it's been really fun playing against them.
Yeah.
Not going to co-sign that.
This is No, my critiques are the same. It's a messy book, and they didn't actually solve the situation of the KO Alpha Strike.
Okay.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, that's wild. That's quite a discrepancy. 138 to 54. Yeah.
So I thought that one was fascinating. I have charts like this for all 15, but we're not going to go through all 15. This is the last page of this because, there is a limit to how much people will stand us just sitting around rambling about this stuff.
Yeah. Totally.
So I tried to pull out the interesting ones. Most of the ones I'm not going to talk about are just like exactly what you'd expect. They're pretty middling. Right? Like, yep, that's what it looks like. S2D I thought was an interesting one because this is a recent one. It's really a sort of evolution based on the new models. It's very much like a one step forward. And I wonder how far off of something like S2D the Lumineth are going to curve. Right? Because the Lumineth are like you can look at the new horse people and go, those are updated silver helms. You can look at the new spear dudes and say those are new elvish spearmen and these are new elvish archers and so on and so forth, right? So much like the cat, they're a step beyond the difference in Slaves to Darkness. But I wonder how close they would curve to this.
Well, it's like OBR. You can look at OBR and go, this is the Screaming Skull Catapult. This is the Skeletal, infantry. The Skeletal Spearmen. This is the Skeletal Horsemen. But it's like, it is a step beyond.
It's a heck of a step. Like, I would argue there's a few more in there. Yes, like, that's more like we're paying homage to the old stuff. Whereas, I think if you've got silver helms right now, you could just take them off the shelf and run them as the new horse guys.
I don't think so. I think it feels like it is a step beyond.
I disagree, and you're going to see lots of people running silver helms, by the way, as the new Lumineth cavalry. Like, if you want a hot prediction, you're going to see some silver helms on the table.
I hope that I have a whole crate of silver helms.
Okay.
Yeah, on the Slaves of the Darkness, I wonder how much that's being influenced in particular by just, again, the universal love for the Chaos Warriors and Chaos Knights, and then maybe, Vanguard, Archeon, I think rates pretty highly in general among folks, as opposed to some of the more older kits like the Marauders, Marauders. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of older kits out there that don't do a whole lot for me personally, but the new
But all
stuff,
the new
oh my
Warcry
god,
kits.
huh?
But all the new Warcry kits.
Oh,
Oh,
sure, yeah,
Yeah, I mean that's got to be pulling this faction up some because, admittedly, all those new Warcry kits are just mind blowing, right?
yeah,
They're even if they don't hit for me personally, I would. This is again where it talks about the perception of the group. I would have rated all those Warcry kits high, and in fact, Slaves to Darkness did get is one of those ones that got a higher rating from me than I personally voted it, right?
hmm
Okay, so cool. That's the army stuff. Let's look at comparison to Tourney stats. So all of this is based on the last Honest Wargamer stats update. It's in AOS 2.6, compiled by LLV. So this is the most recent data pull he did based on, so when I say AOS 2.6, this is since the FAQ, when's the winter FAQ meta. Okay?
Yep.
So that's the stats I'm using here. So first off, I have them in weighted average order. So that's the first column you see there. Pretty straightforward. Yep. And then you have their meta percentage, their match win, and their top 10, right?
Yep.
And what you see is a non-correlation, right? Like, there's just, like, it's all over the place. I will say the top... Now, with Ironjaws, I'm just counting it as the Ironjaws stats. Obviously, Big Wah could contain Ironjaws and does have additional separate... Those stats are separated in LLV stats. This is just Ironjaws, so I'm counting this as people running pure Ironjaws. This is as close as I could make the comparison, right? But, when you look at sort of who are your big bads on this list right now, being Tzeentch and being OBR, yeah, I mean, they're both down on the weighted average of what people think of the models, but they're performing highly in tournaments, but and they have decent, like, quite solid meta representation. 5.5% for Tzeentch, 8.5 for OBR, right? But their scores don't.
What that means is that the aesthetics don't make the meta.
Right. Yep.
Like, you can say that people buy models for their aesthetics, and that may be true, but that's not the armies that show up at events.
Right. Well, you've got to, I mean, yes, like on a weighted degree right here, obviously, is what we're talking about. I mean, 4% of the meta is Gits, right, which are the highest thing. It's not that far off. But yes, it seems like, because there's several steps you got to go through there yet, right? You have to ask yourself, like, are the people who get into armies just for the aesthetic, are they even taking them as often? Do those players represent an under share of tournament goers, right? Are tournament goers by their nature more willing to follow the meta trends and to care less about aesthetics, right?
Mm.
Yep.
And to me, this is some evidence to that sort of long held belief, because OBR is third from the bottom on aesthetic rating, right, at 5.39, and yet they are far and away the kings of the meta as of this.
Of distribution. Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of people who probably aren't the biggest OBR fans who are playing OBR.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting.
Right. And
wait, shout out to the fat metal right now. I'm looking at some of the meta ranges right now. Yeah, we've got a pretty good meta still.
Yeah, it's pretty good. There's a couple outliers, like Tzeentch obviously is problematic. And again, I don't know if that's moved in the last 3 weeks. So this is as of 3/3 or 15 days, whatever. There's been more events. So I don't know how much those new events would factor into that.
Yeah. Hearthguard pulling a lot of weight. 63%. Good job, boys.
They're pretty good.
Very high match win. And, certainly an outsized representation for Fireslayers, right? Being so low on the score and yet still having one of the higher meta percentages, right, at 4.31. Not the highest by far, but a higher one.
So you're saying that rules are really selling that army, not aesthetics.
I'm saying rules are causing it to bring people to bring it to a tournament to some degree, right? You could have you can't say are selling it. No, that's a leap you can't make.
Go the sales numbers.
Right. And also, there's a question of percentage. Okay, so like what I mean there is you could have 1,000. Let's just shrink it down to imagine there's 1,000 people, right, who are buying armies in general. To make this more simple, you could have 400 of them buying Gitz armies, but only 2 of that 400 going to tournaments with them, right?
Sure.
You could have 80 people buying OBR armies and 70 of them going to tournaments with them, right? So, like that's not because we don't have the sales data, you can't make that logical leap there.
Right.
Yeah.
So GW, if you want to leak us the sales data, we'll do the analysis for you.
Sure. Happy to do some regression. Yep.
Daughters of Cain still pulling a strong 58%. It's an old book. I don't know how they're doing it. Old book.
It's okay. They're getting a new book here in a couple months.
Let me advance a theory on Daughters, right? And why Daughters have a 1.83 meta percentage representation right now. Okay.
Old book, man. It's barely playable.
It was
sure. Barely playable. Chad Graham. Shouts to Chad Graham. I've been getting lists from Chad for the last couple of weeks about how his army is barely playable. He's having to get sisters on the table for heaven's sake, having to get some mortal wound output. I don't know if he's going to be able to make it.
Sure.
All right. Sorry, I had to get that out.
So let me talk about a tale of 2 armies here, gentlemen. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Doc for a moment. Doc has a meta percentage right now of 1.83%, and yet a win rate of 58.1. Right. So like they've had 9 top 10s, pretty decent. I pulled top 10s as opposed to I could have done podiums or first, second, thirds, but top 10 seems like a good metric because landing in the top 10 means you took a good list and are a good player. Luck often influences whether you go from the top 10 to being in the top 3, right?
Yep.
So, Doc has a 5.85, right? Yep. They're quite middle. And remember, they were one of the kings of meh, right?
Yep.
Here is my theory I am going to advance to you.
Yep.
The theory is this. Even though they're such a winning army, and they are, like 58.1 is a highly winning army, right? And that's been coming down slightly, but they've hung around that 60% top of the fat middle for basically their existence. And they were the curve destroyers previously.
Right.
When did they come out? Early 18?
Yeah, March of 18.
Yeah, they came out like a month after or 2 months after Gitz.
Wow, that's wild. And have been up there the entire time. Wow.
Right. So this is an incredibly consistent. Oh, thank you very much. Yes. I apologize. The queens of meh. Thank you. That is absolutely correct. Thank you very much. Absolutely fair. So here's my argument. We've wondered, where did all the Doc armies go? Because they used to have a much higher meta representation, right?
Right.
Here's my argument that again, this is just theory, this is conjecture. Remember when we talked previously about the meh and that you want extremes and people having high attachment type of thing?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Doc, where it landed, so middling, because it was such a, like, it is such a meh. Like, it very much curved to the middle.
People could put it down or pick it up as needed.
Exactly. Like, people didn't have that strong of an attachment to it. They played their games, they did well in the tournaments or not, but eventually it just got boring, and they weren't in love with it enough to keep with it. And so its meta percentage just keeps falling, because it is the queen of meh. Right?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
People aren't in love with the army.
Right. You look at something like Ironjaws. Ironjaws has this massive... So this is the tale of 2 armies, like I said. Let's compare that to Ironjaws, right? Ironjaws right now has a pretty decent match win rate. 45-1, fine enough, right? Like, it's fat middle-ish. Like, in a perfect... I think the perfect world meta we would hope for would be that everybody falls between 45 and 55, right? That's the
appreciate you finally saying it. It took you a while, but it's out there. Okay, good to know.
No, that's the perfected world. I think a good fat middle is 40 to 60 for what we're going to get in AOS. Okay. But
by the way, Ben was talking about percentages in the last show on the Stormcast. It was fantastic.
Oh, nice.
He was, yeah,
Interesting.
like like what the ideal range is, and they're taking that into account. And yeah, I love that show. Incidentally, just getting an update on where things are. Over 40 play testers. He gave so many great details
Nice.
on
I
what's
haven't
going on
got a
behind
chance
the
to watch
scenes.
that one yet. I'll have to
Yeah.
give it a watch. I was saving it for this weekend when I'm stuck inside and trying to finish up all these motorbikes.
Yep.
But at any rate, Iron Jaws had this 45.1 match win. And they got a new book, and a lot of people like them, and I think they're a really good army. But there was a time when they were down below 40, right? Like before their new book and before the GHB rules update. That's really when it happened, right?
Right.
They were way down below 40. And yet they consistently had a decent meta percentage and still do, right? Clocking in at, let's call it around 4%. Much more than that, by the way, when you figure there's a lot of Big Wa armies also using these models, right?
Yeah.
Like Big Wa is 4% itself of the meta, right? And if half of those have, are Iron Jaws focused forces, then they're up around 6%. Again, complete conjecture. But the point being is that the reason people stuck with Iron Jaws is because ultimately they were loved. They were beloved. And like, they didn't care, right?
Right.
Win or not, they were like, nah, I picked my pony, dog. This thing is my boys, and we're going to war, son. Right?
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like the trees were similar, a little less on average, but yeah, so many people who have stuck with that army. Just thinking about the community over the past 5 years, Iron Jaws and Sylvaneth really stand out armies that have been around for a while that have maintained a certain level of love in the community, keeping having a 4% meta, that's fantastic.
Right. It's just an interesting thing to me how much this matters for, if I was to put on like my corporate sales hat, right? Or any time where I've done sales, you talk about retention a lot, right? Now I don't know that GW wants retention. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, right?
Sure.
Maybe they actually don't favor retention because they want you buying new armies. But I would argue that like clearly when you hit on this stuff, when you hit on these scores and people you get this real high attachment, especially when you curve towards the 9s and 10s, that people get dug in and stick with it. Right.
Well, I mean, here I am still painting dwarves fire slayers. How many months? How many years later?
Yeah, years at this point. Yeah.
Like I'm 3 years after the KO release,
Yeah.
and I hate the rules of some of the units, and yet I'm literally painting up some of those units that I hate.
Right.
I'm literally like painting up Arco units right now.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just when I saw these stats and I thought about that as a narrative. Now again, that's just a narrative, right? I don't have science behind that. But other than like I have a lot of indicators, but that's just me making inferences from the data, right? Okay.
Basically, Tom, I'd love to have a 5-minute chat sometime, not necessarily this show, or 10 minutes on summarizing what your issues are with. I know you guys did a long show, but like getting to the core of it, because I do think that, I don't know, my bias is to think that you're off in general on that, but that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, we can have a chat.
But yeah, fair enough.
I don't want to derail the show.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I think as much of it for me, it's as much that I don't like the play style that I'm being forced into.
Yeah, I just think that like I think there's a disconnect between your sensibility compared to the general sensibility, but I could be off on that as well.
Well, again, what I just said was I don't like the play style.
Yeah, totally.
That I like. That the army could be perfectly competitive, but if I don't want to play an 8th edition Wonder style skirmish army, I'm not gonna like it.
Yeah, fair.
And I'm gonna see all the ways that it could be beat in the meta.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
So now let's do some comparison to AOS reminders. So because this is also interesting to me. Obviously, the tournament stats are sort of again like a lagging indicator, and what they're giving an output of is the cohort that's willing to bring these armies to matches, right? That's that set there. whereas reminders is more of a sort of a predictive analytics type of data set, right? Because there's no barrier of entry. You can go on there and just make lists, right? Now, assumingly, most of the lists are being made, like, because you have to do a decent amount of work to get all your reminders out of there. So, assumingly, people are mostly printing reminders for armies they're playing, right? They don't just go on and print reminders for nothing.
They're not just making lists. Like, this is not list builder.
Correct. It's not. It's not looking at, like, you'd get a much wider set if you were on, like, if Scroll Builder keeps all their lists, like if you could pull all that data set, right? Okay. So here I thought it'd be interesting to compare the weighted average against the selection percentage in AOS reminders against the meta percentage from LLV's numbers, and then look at a delta. Okay.
Okay.
So you look at, for example, let's look at Night Haunt, where overall 6.74, and they get selected a lot. Right? Like, they have a 5.2% of the AOS reminder lists are Night Haunt. Okay, so quite high. Not the highest, but they're up there. They're, like, in arguably tied for second place, right? And their meta percentage is way lower. Right? Like 1.91. It tells me, like, that delta is massive at 3.29. So what this right here tells me is that there's a lot of people who really love Night Haunt, right?
Who are playing
Night Haunt. They're just not taking them to tournaments. Exactly. Yep. Yep. Exactly. That's right, Tom.
Right? Where's my Night Haunt bros?
Yes. For those who like the Ghosty Boys, we know you're out there. We hear you. We see you. We understand you're playing. You've just decided that tournament life is... You're
going to bring your Fire Slayers.
You're going to bring a different army. That's right. Yep.
Okay. I accept. They're people that I identify with way more than I anticipated.
So that's what's interesting here to me when you compare the red to the greens, okay, is the greens... The selection percentage hews a lot closer, still not exactly accurate, but a lot closer to what we would expect on aesthetics, right? Like, reds are grouped toward the top, greens are grouped toward the bottom. Because you look at OBR or Slaanesh or Fire Slayers, they're all being, especially, this is terrible with OBR, like, they still had 5% of the lists in AOS reminders. Still significant. They're in, like, 4th place or something. But they are still way outsized in tournaments, right?
Right.
Same with Slaanesh, same with Fire Slayers. These are all things where people go, yep, those are good, and have keyed into that, even though we don't love the aesthetics, right? Much lower selection of people actually getting into them. So this tells me that more of the players, trying to kind of unpack what we talked about earlier, where more of the players who have the army are taking it to the tournament, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's another indicator at that, right?
Right.
Like, a lot of people have Night Haunt and very few of them are bringing them to tournaments, is what that tells me.
Right.
You know, the people who have Slaanesh, a larger percentage of those people are bringing Slaanesh to the tournament, is basically what I'm getting at here, right?
Yep.
I'm sorry, folks. This is awesome. I think this is really, really fascinating. If you're not digging it, I'm sorry. You're missing out.
It seems like people are digging it, so that's cool.
There's some good stuff here. Like, this is really, really useful information. Add a couple more reallys there.
And IDK is also another one that jumped out at me, right? Being almost 2 full percentage points higher, right? Where, again, like, a lot of IDK players recognize that IDK is good. And, you know, so an outsized percentage of the group of owners are taking it to tournaments, right? There's not a lot of IDK players who are just banging out lists and, like, taking it there. A lot of them are taking it to the tournament. If you're an IDK player, you're tending more often to take it to a tournament. So.
Or Night Haunt.
Yes. So yeah, there you go. I thought that was kind of an interesting comparative matrix there.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yep. Yeah. So there you go. That's what I got, folks. That's the end of the stat breakdown. All right, I'm going to minimize back, so put your clothes back on, guys.
We're good.
7.7 for Stormcast. That's wow. That's
Yeah,
the
they
highest
are
by quite
the
a bit.
highest. They in AOS reminders, they are the highest number of. They're number one.
Yeah,
Yep.
still 5 point. Yeah, that meta percentage has definitely dropped off over the last 12, 18 months, but that selection percent is still pretty high.
Yep.
Uh,
What that tells me is that, yes, in fact, there are still a lot of Stormcast players out there with Stormcast armies who are making lists and taking them. There's a lot of people like you just running Staunchcast at their local store and then also going to a tournament. You know what I mean? Like that's happening.
yeah, so incredibly disappointed. There was not a single goddamn dragon being played at Las Vegas Open this
What?
year.
Wow.
Seriously, not a single one.
Maybe people don't
It is
travel.
Yeah.
All right. So summary thoughts and stuff like that. By the way, one of the questions people might have is, this data set and this sort of prezzo that I put together or whatever. I'll try to find a place by the weekend to store all this, like see if I can get it up on Dropbox or something and share a link with everybody. Okay. Like I'll put it in a secured thing. So people can go get this data. I don't care. I'm more than willing to share the raw data, and you're more than willing to go out there and, do some of your own work or examination or whatever with it. Okay. So there you go.
Yes.
So I will make this publicly available. And you can double check my figures in case I had a mistake in there anywhere. I tried to be accurate, but look, I'll admit this was a lot of stuff I was sifting through, but I'm pretty sure I got it all correct. So there you go. There's a lot of like slicing and dicing data down in different ways. So overall,
So yeah, yeah, go.
No, that's fine. I'll actually pause. I've talked a lot. So what do you guys think
Well, no,
of all this?
yeah. Well, I was curious to hear you start with your sense of some of the conclusions from this data. Like, what do you think this all means?
So what it tells me is a couple things, like what I see from the summary. Here would be my summary thoughts. One, for the most part, and this was a question that came up a lot out of what Tom was talking about, of like, I think maybe Tom made a snarky negative comment about AOS models. And I think that's what started all this off in a group chat we were having. You've gone full noir detective, by the way, Tyler. I love it. Now that the light's gone out behind you.
Oh my God, I have.
Yes, it's wonderful. It's great. You are a 1930s noir film right now. I'm gonna reference this when I tell people. I'm gonna take a screen cap of this. And when I talk about painting in extreme lighting situations, this is the example right here.
Absolutely. I'm still on brand with. I got the cup rocking.
Yep.
Excellent.
So, yeah, I mean, my snarky comment was that I think that when I look at the actual AOS armies, it feels like there have been a lot more misses than there were hits.
You said something like that, yes. And
yeah, where I was saying that, like, when we actually look at original armies that are native to AOS with new product lines, it feels like to me there have been a lot more misses. And I was looking at things like, it was in light of Lumineth and then OBR, and I began like looking back through the full new product lines, and I was like, I don't know that I like a lot of these.
Yeah, and I think that so the data tells me that that is a busted myth, right?
Okay. Yep.
Because when you look at this, the only person who fell below the 5-point line, right, through at least average, who's the above average line, is Fire Slayers, right? And that a lot of these armies actually ranked in the upper 5s, 6s, a couple 7s in there. Sorry, 7s is what people perceived them as, which is just as valuable when you're determining this, right? And so what it tells me is that for the most part, actually, the AOS launched armies have been quite successful, right? People have liked them. There is a clear miss in Fire Slayers. That's definitely in the data. Slaanesh was much less popular than I had expected it to be. Like that.
Aesthetically popular.
Aesthetically popular, yes. That Nurgle is so Marmite, I wouldn't have expected that. Like, so John Chaves in the comments said, your conjecture about strong emotions equals sort of this ongoing higher meta representation doesn't hold true for Nurgle. Thoughts on that? Possibly because of the Marmite. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to regress out individual facts. Like, again, but I would say that Nurgle being so much more Marmite-y and having like much more of an inverse style trendline curve means that its total population of people who love it was just less, right? Like, it doesn't look like Ironjaws, where it was tilted so far toward the top, right? Ironjaws was sort of this ideal army where, yes, it doesn't have a huge number of haters. Yes, there are some people who rate it ones, but it leans way toward the top, right? Nurgle has a lot of top, but it also has a lot of bottom, right?
Yep, I'd agree with that.
So when faced with this, there just wasn't as many people fully on board to carry the meta percentage through, you know, bad rules or whatever, like there was for Ironjaws. So Nighthaunt is way more popular than I expected. Like, holy crap. That blew my skirt up.
So the warning there is, for those of you, watch out. Woe be the day that they get good rules.
Oh my god, if Nighthaunt get a kick butt book, right? If they get some real strong rules or something like that, woof! You're gonna see the ghosts flood the tables. They will suddenly jump, right? Yeah, in the same way you saw, what I would expect to have happen there is much like you saw with Ironjaws, right? Where suddenly, like, Ironjaws and the War Clans were just flooding tables, right?
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I got distracted by the chat. I may have missed it. I mean, what's your sense of a baseline? Maybe you already said it and I just missed it. But in terms of these percentages, maybe if you want to focus on the collective average, the collective weighted average as an ideal baseline.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it says to me is that when you look at sort of the overall weighted average, it tends to fall at about 6, right? Which says that overall these armies have been quite successful as they've been launched, right? Because more positive than negative feelings about them, right?
Okay, that's certainly my sense as well. Because when looking at a number of these that are falling in that range, Ironjaws, Lumineth, etc., that matches reality, like my sense of reality. But there were some that definitely stood out. Nighthaunt, especially, that skewed more positive than I would have expected. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It also tells me that destruction is very popular, right? Like, people have generally liked what's been done with destruction. Gets very high, Ironjaw's very high, right? Like, if this new giant army ends up actually being like a destruction type force, which we don't know that it could be anything.
It's a gold force. Continue.
Sure, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not also destruction, right? Or has a destruction type aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
Is that the sort of destruction aesthetics are proving very popular, right? It tells me that we all have the other big takeaway for me is that there's generally a positivity bias. We all think that other people like armies more than they do. That we think we're the outlier for liking something less. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When in fact, no, we all tend to like these things
about
the same, lower than that. Your opinions might not be that wrong if you're not extreme, right?
Yeah. I was just looking on destruction right now. Ogre Maw Tribe 6.86% in the meta. That's tracking pretty well. That's quite high. And I mean, obviously, that's a fairly low buy-in right now, especially if you're running the Stonehorn, which is generally what you should be doing if you're wanting to win games. But yeah.
Well, here's a great question there. Is that a missed opportunity? Okay. So, like, obviously, we didn't survey on ogres, right?
Yeah.
But we know ogres came back in the meta real strong. Like, maybe I'll do this again at some point, just with like in some kind of way, and I'll survey for the non-AOS armies, right? And we'll see if we can't hit the same statistical significance. Because it would be fascinating to do a comparative to existing armies, right? Who got, no new models, things like ogres. And if ogres also rate super high, which I don't know. My bias would be they would. Right? The destruction seems very strong. Like, people tend to like them. Ogres flooded the tables. A lot of people kept, had them around and kept those armies and were ready to get them back on the table.
Yeah.
Then what that tells me is you missed a trick, GW. Right? That was a missed investment opportunity.
Right. They should have bought more.
Should have made.
Should have made new ogre kits. Yeah.
Right. Because if you've got, like, right now, what this tells me is if I was GW and I was looking at this, I'd be plotting out my new Gits release. I'd be planning out, like, my supplementary Iron Jaws release, right? And you know, that kind of thing. Because I'd say there's a lot of love for this faction already. We already hit the mark, right?
Right. We just need to do more of what we've already done.
Yeah, give them more of what they love. Like, if I was trying to, if I was thinking about what forces do I want to expand, this would factor into my decision making, because this would tell me I've got a ready-made market. The people who love Gits and Iron Jaw is a relatively small force. It's eminently expandable.
I mean, that's probably the front runner in terms of this, and it's been that for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, they've had so much love for so long that but not releases.
So GW, if you're listening, hello, hi, how you doing over there? If you haven't already planned an Iron Jaws expansion, might want to fast track that one, whatever that looks like. You know, get that in the pipeline as quick as possible. There's money just sitting on that table waiting for you.
It's true.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes, as someone mentioned, the Mega Boss on Gorgrunta. Yeah, I mean the obvious model that everybody's wanted, but you could go. There's plenty of stuff you could add to that. What it tells me is that I wouldn't invest anymore in Fire Slayers. Let that, like, sometimes you got to let some fruit die on the vine, right? Like,
I hate you.
Look, that dog don't hunt. Okay, so I'm sorry. That's just what it is, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, just let that one be. Like,
no,
it's there.
It's okay. It sounds like I've single-handedly. I was talking to Tyler about how many Fire Slayer like Mohawks that I have.
Sure.
I must have single-handedly like driven the Fire Slayer market, because I probably have like 250 to 300 Mohawks.
That's wild, man.
Like units with like Fire Slayered units, so to say. So it's funny.
Yep. So yeah, as pointed out, Keith just pointed out that yes, Iron Jaws are getting a second Underworld's Warband, which is true. Which, yep, smart choice there. So yeah, absolutely, yeah, it's an excellent point. So there you go.
And in terms of other,
hold on. Marston said, and now boom, the next campaign book / box is orcs versus the orcs in the all points versus Night Haunt. Yes.
Weird.
Yeah, real winner of a box set there. That'll sell.
Oh man, I would buy that in a heartbeat if it's like Bladegeist or Bladegeist.
Bladegeist, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm in.
But so, what about other prospects for this? So, Vince, you and I, we had gotten into a conversation last week about, looking at this more expansively, and other questions that could arise. I think one of trying to assess how might you be able to use this, or try to go about assessing other variables like preferences in play style, or preferences in median model range or average model range or distribution of model range. Where do people fall in there? Trying to get a little more of a semblance of, quote unquote, an ideal form for the Age of Sigmar experience. Personally, those sorts of things.
I think there's either with supplementary data or stuff you could do from here. I think you could. So we've talked a lot before about the psychographic profiles of Johnny, Timmy, and Spike, right?
Right.
So there are also aesthetic profiles. Okay. So aesthetic profiles are Melvin and Vorthos, and those tend to trigger when people like the sort of way that the aesthetic all works together. Does that make sense? Like so for example, Vorthos really likes it when there's sort of a complete synergistic rules alignment. Like it's a 4/4 for 4 that does like a 4 damage effect, and everything about it sort of flows. There's this sort of synergy, right? Or something like that. It's a 4/4 for 4 that has haste, and when he comes into play, can do 4 damage to target creature. Right, like that's a that kind of has this Vorthos. That's a classic Vorthos card, right? Because
what do you think is a good example of a faction with that? Are we talking like Seraphon with like combos and synergies and sort of a
sure, where everything seems to align, like what it does on the tin and the rules and all of it and the play style. Like you read about it and all of it seems to just function correctly synergistically, right? Vorthos is
Gotcha.
synergy.
Okay.
Um,
I was thinking like Seraphon has a fair amount of Death Starry stuff going on. Like you could really, you can make a Saurus unit really strong. You can make Skinks really strong.
my
You can
answer
really
is
pile.
OBR.
Okay.
Or
OBR
would
is
you say KO?
yeah, KO is probably another one. Yeah, absolutely. OBR and KO, right? Like they're very Vorthosy in that
Gotcha.
like when you look at the thing and then how they function and the rules they have supporting them and the synergies that are out there, it's like, yep, that all like, they're all about paying the tithe, and you put down this big nexus and it hurts people, and they're these very ordered phalanxy type of people, and they fight like that, and they rely on their unit commanders, and their unit commanders have these RDP, right? Like everything
Yeah.
about it seems to fit together. The other side of that is the Melvin, right? Oh, thank you. Somebody said Iron Jaws, and yes, I agree. Iron Jaws is also a good example of this. Melvin is when you have an aesthetic alignment between sort of the look of the thing and how it functions. Okay, so like if I were to look at the art on a card, on a Magic card, and then be able to guess exactly what that thing is and does, like if I could get pretty close to the rules without reading the rules based on the art, that's a good Melvin card. Right? Like Nagash is a great Melvin model. Right? You look at Nagash and what he's doing. He's got all these books floating around him. He's up on magic. He's this giant skeletal being. You're like, well, I don't know. I would assume he's a super powerful, magical, spellcastery death guy. And you'd be like, yep, you hit it. Like on the board.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you've got, right? So it could be interesting to explore this from like, does the success can some of this aesthetic appreciation be boiled down to when it hits in a Melvin-like fashion, right? Like, and arguably that might be true. Like we could infer that, but I wouldn't want to say it because intuitively you look at like Gits and how they play. Yep, feels pretty right. Like if I were to describe to you the army of Gits in non-rules terms, right? Just like the way that Gits are in the world.
Yeah.
The rules wouldn't be that far afield from what you would probably guess in your mind, right? Same with Iron Jaws. Well, I assume they run across. They're real Melvin-y, right? Like you look at them and you're like, oh yeah, they run across the table and probably punch people super hard. And you're like, yep, you got it, nailed it. Night Haunt feel like ghosts that should be popping up everywhere. Like they have the pop up from the Underworld rule, and they all fly, and stuff like that.
Yeah, so like if you take at least, I mean, I haven't played Daughters of Cain, but when I look at Daughters of Cain, I see a fair amount of disappointment in terms of constrained variety, in terms of war scrolls and points and battalions and Hagnar or bust being so dominant, and so yeah, that affects probably a lot of people's interest, I would suspect, if you're not just concerned about winning games in Daughters of Cain. Whereas when I look at the models, like the actual potential variety there,
right,
it's solid. But compared to the combination of variables.
Daughters have a huge Melvin disconnect, right? Because you'd assume they'd be like glass cannon, lightly armored murder machines. And like, certainly they're murder machines, but the rest of that statement is not true. I went on a rant on Meph Show that I think he published as a separate video because one of my classic problems that I've always hated in the Daughters of Cain army is why, oh why, does the Cauldron of Blood broadcast a +1 to save?
Yeah.
Like, so let me get this straight. The cauldron stoked with blood that you're offering as a sacrifice to your murder god is helps everybody be defensive. No, no. If like again, there's just such a Melvin disconnect there, right? Like if I showed you that model and said, "Hey, this blood cauldron dedicated to a god of murder affects all the witches around it. How does it affect them?" You'd be like, "Well, I assume it helps them with the murder. Yeah, it drives them into a frenzy, right?"
I think you've got another show here going through armies. Which ones have the disconnect? Which ones, positive correlation or disconnect in terms of, positive or negative rating on what you would expect versus not.
Yes. I also do want to very quickly shout out Alex Butler in the comments. Yes, indeed. I'm hoping that wasn't a mistype and you did mean spoopies. Because yes, they are spoopies, absolutely. Which I'm picking up that reference, Alex. I just want to get that out there. Spoopies, absolutely. Okay. At any rate, yeah. So I think it would be interesting to examine them from that kind of a perspective, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of good data here. Like I said, I've got this survey thing. Now I can do them all as one survey. I don't have to break it up into like 3 surveys like I did when I
Oh
created
man,
it.
that'd be great.
So, so there you go. If people liked this, here's what I would ask. If people liked this and thought this was fun and cool, first, hit that like button. Do that. Second, I would love in the comments other things you think would be interesting to explore in the future. Drop them down in the comments below once the show gets posted so I have a record of it. Because if you put it in the chat now, it'll be very hard to come back to. But I'd love people to drop in the comments, you know, other things they'd like to explore either with this existing data or, you know, or other things you'd love to see survey data get collected on in the future. It seemed like most people were pretty cool to do this. I design a lot of surveys in my professional career, and so I'm very sensitive to how the questions are worded. So I try to avoid bias in the questions. I'm very sensitive to making sure they're fast. Like my average complete time on each survey was 1 minute, which is what I'm aiming at, right? Like I want people to be able to do this quick. I never want to take too much of your time. So I'm always aiming for like a 1 to 3 minute survey completion time at most. So I'll try to be always judicious with it. But if people like it, then that's cool. We can do more. Like it's out there. I've got the freaking subscription. We might as well use it and collect some cool data.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like I said, yeah, we'll need to talk more about the play style side of things with this, but personally don't have a good sense of what the community's overall sensibilities are with preferred play styles, preferred model ranges, what are the different camps, how big or small are those camps, and we have such a rich, really extraordinary range of existing factions and play styles already to pull from. I think that can be really fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. I think looking at stuff like play styles, looking at stuff like number of armies people have, things like that could be really interesting. You know, how often people go to tournaments or something like that, or how often people go to their local store and play games. There's lots of interesting angles we could take on this stuff, right? The one thing I wouldn't want to ever try to back into is sales data. Like I'm not going to try to ever make a survey that backs into it, because if you're watching this show, you know, like, first of all, thank you. Awesome. I much appreciate it, guys. And guys and gals. And secondly, like there's just such a larger cohort. I would need to hit such a high survey number to actually hit statistical significance on sales data, right? Like I would need something like, I just off the top of my head, I'd probably need to hit like 10,000 respondents or something to the survey to get anywhere near statistical significance on sales data, because that's so swingy and spiky, right? And you've got you have a bias problem in the cohort. You have people answering if you're watching this, or you follow me on Twitter or something.
Sure.
So I want to kind of stay away from trying to back into sales data. That's not what I'm here for, right? But things like this, you can get to statistical significance much easier, right?
But if GW, if you want to float us those numbers,
right? If you want to throw us some sales data, hey, I'll toss them in the pile. I'll pivot table that right on in. Doop, doop, slide it in. So there you go. All right, cool. Well, that's it, gentlemen. I feel good about this. This is a lot of fun. I hope people like this.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I hope people got some stuff painted. I hope people liked going through this kind of data. Like I said, we'll do Seraphon next week. So I appreciate it very much. I'm looking forward to that one. It's a fun army. I'm going to get out once I finish up with this project. There's a couple things I'm thinking about messing with, but one of them is I've got an old army of Seraphon, like a very old army. And I was thinking about getting them out and doing another army in 24 hours with all my Seraphon.
You should totally do that.
I'll need to get a couple new. I'll need to get like a new Carnosaur or something just to have one of them to add in. But I think other than that, like I have maybe like 3 Stegodons, and
writes itself.
Yeah, exactly. I've got just like Skinks for days and Saurus for days and Salamanders, and I've even got Kroiger and all that stuff. They're all metal. So many of them are metal. Not the Skinks and the Saurus. They're all plastic, obviously. I don't think I would strip anything. I'll just paint over it. Like,
sure.
Who cares? I'm not stripping a 24-hour army project. But what a great 24-hour army that would be like. That's a 24-hour.
It'd be such an easy army.
Absolutely.
It'd be such an easy.
And I think I'll play with like oil paints and stuff like that. That would be a fun one to do too. Because then I'll just do it all and let them dry. Done.
If skanks are involved, burn it all down. It's kind of like a pandemic. You got to quarantine the whole lot if you've got skanks in near proximity.
You're out of your mind.
So
I'd love to do a skink army.
Well, there you go. Next week we'll get into it. So there you go, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you really appreciated this little stats deep dive and found this interesting. Watch me on Twitter, and I'll have the I'll post you out the link to where that is, to where you can go get this data if you're somebody who's interested in taking a look at it. I'll provide the raw. I don't care. If you use it, just please credit back or whatever. I'll trust everybody to be responsible data managers with all of that. I obviously, by the by, just so everybody's clear, none of your personal data was collected in any way. It's all anonymous. Like, I have no idea who answered what, just so we're all 100% clear about that. When I say the raw data, I can't even see anything like IP addresses that answered or whatever. That's all hidden from me. So, like, I know nothing. I just know some person hit 5. That's literally all I have, right? That's the raw data that's going out there. It's just like number of responses and what they responded to. Okay. Cool. So just, I want to be 100% clear that one, I don't have any of your personal data, and 2, I would never share it even if I did. So there we go. Okay, cool. Very good, everybody. Awesome. Tyler, thanks, brother.
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate you doing all this.
Hey, it was a lot of fun. And who doesn't love putting together more PowerPoints? What I do, my day job suddenly became my hobby as well. For all of you out there, like I said, don't forget to hit like. I really appreciate it when you hit like, because it helps other people find the show. So hit that, and that helps us out. It helps more people find the show, which is great. That's what we all want to do, especially in times like this, because we're gonna be streaming all the time. So expect lots of shows. I'm gonna try to do some extra content here and there where I can. So as able. I mean, I still have my normal job. Nothing in my life has changed. I still have all my normal work, but I'm gonna try to do it. So for all of you out there watching, thank you so much. It's deeply appreciated as always. And we'll see you next Wednesday.